Hey guys, tonight we begin with the life of a medieval executioner, a figure caught between law and silence, feared by the crowds, avoided by the townsfolk, and burdened with work that was never truly spoken of once the blade had fallen. So, while you're getting comfortable, feel free to tap like and subscribe if this kind of calm, late-night history is your thing. And I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Drop a comment with your city and what time it was when you pressed play. It's always a quiet kind of surprise seeing these stories travel so far. Now, maybe switch off the lights, get that soft fan noise going in the background, and let's drift into tonight's slow journey through the past. You wake up to a morning quieter than it has any right to be. The kind of quiet where even the birds don't seem sure if they should sing. The sun isn't high yet, but there's already a gold-edged glow sliding across the tops of crooked rooftops. You sit up from your bed, a rough wooden thing stuffed with straw, and for a long moment, you just listen. The town's already stirring. You hear carts creaking across cobblestones, a dog barking somewhere off by the mill. But underneath that, there's something else. The hush. The pause in every conversation when someone catches sight of you walking by. You've learned to hear it even when you're still indoors. The silence that follows your name being spoken. Your name isn't really your name anymore. People don't use it. They call you the headsman, the rope, or just give you a glance that says everything they're too nervous to say out loud. It wasn't always this way. But it's been long enough now that even you forget what it felt like to belong in the middle of things. And that's the thing. Nobody ever plans on becoming an executioner. Some are criminals pressed into service. Others inherit the job when there's no one else. You were just in the wrong place one cold autumn morning, standing close enough to the magistrate when he muttered about needing a man who isn't squeamish. That was the day everything shifted. Before that, you might have been a tanner, or maybe a soldier. After, you belong to the town in the way a sword belongs to its master. Stepping outside, the air is crisp and sharp. Wood smoke curls from chimneys. You tug your hood low over your face, not so much for warmth as for habit. The cloth smells faintly of iron and sweat. People step aside as you pass, pretending they're interested in bread or cloth stalls. Mothers pull children close by the hand. You spot a little boy once, a new face in town maybe, staring wide-eyed before his father yanks him back. Poor kid doesn't know yet that looking too long is a kind of bad luck around here. It's not just superstition. The old folks say walking in an executioner's shadow shortens your life. No one really knows where that story started. Maybe some bard needed an excuse to explain why they lost a dice game. Maybe some towns just need their monsters. You make your way to the square, where the chopping block stands quiet for now. Old oak, split and scarred with deep grooves from countless blades. Some spots are darker than others, stained permanently into the grain. You've learned to check it every morning. Make sure it's steady. Make sure there's no rot. An unstable block is the kind of thing that gets people talking, and not in the good way. Even now, there's a strange pride in doing it right. Historians still wonder if executioners practiced their craft privately. Did they have spare logs out behind their homes for training? Did they rehearse the swing to make sure it fell clean? Maybe. Maybe not. You know this much. A clean cut is quieter. Less screaming, less shame. The town respects you more when the job's done in one stroke. That's part of the strange balance. You're hated and needed in the same breath. Banished to the edge of things, yet summoned whenever there's judgment to be carried out. And make no mistake, there's judgment every week. This isn't some sleepy hamlet with nothing but sheep theft to worry about. Between pickpockets, bandits, and the occasional noble caught in the wrong bed at the wrong time, the block sees regular use. Of course, not everything ends with a sword. You've also got the rope. That thick, scratchy thing you keep coiled in a wooden box back at home. Hanging's a different kind of business. Slower, less surgical, if you can call any of this work that. And there's burning, though that's usually saved for special occasions. Witchcraft, heresy, public examples meant to remind everyone exactly who holds the power. There's a little ledger tucked in your chest by the bed, faded ink on rough parchment, payments noted, names written down in a hand, so careful it hardly looks like your own. Executioners don't work for free. That's another thing people pretend not to know. Sometimes it's coin, hard silver, tucked into pouches tied with plain string. Sometimes it's goods. A wheel of cheese, a bolt of cloth, 2 fat hens left nervously at your doorstep before dawn. And sometimes it's stranger. A carved ring, a necklace that belonged to the condemned. Things left behind as payment or perhaps as a kind of offering. You're not supposed to keep them, but they pile up all the same. Little trophies no one admits to collecting. Your house, naturally, sits apart from the others. Beyond the market square, past the last row of stone cottages. A small wooden building with a sagging roof and a door that creaks loud enough to announce your presence long before you step through it. Inside, it smells of oiled leather and old iron. There's a fire always going, though it doesn't do much against the damp. There are mornings when you find things left outside your door. Bread, ale, once, a bundle of herbs tied with red thread. You never see who leaves them. But it's a kind of uneasy peace offering. The town can't quite bring itself to love you, but it knows better than to let you starve. You keep to yourself most nights. No family. No friends dropping by for a drink. There's an old story, passed between towns, about executioners cursed never to have children. Whether that's truth or superstition, it keeps even the bravest girls from looking your way too long. There's a heavy sense of rhythm to it all. Wake, walk, check the block, sharpen your blade, wait, and on the days when someone's name is called, you perform your duty with as much quiet grace as the job allows. No theatrics, no shouting, just a clean swing and the slow thud of inevitability. By the time the sun dips below the horizon, you're back at home again, wine in hand, staring into the flames, wondering, not for the first time, how many more names will pass through your hands before you finally put the sword down for good. And out there, beyond the edge of town, in the deep woods, or along the far road, someone's already telling a story about you. A nameless figure in the hood, a man with the blood-stained boots, a little taller than life, a little quieter than truth. Now and then, you wonder if any of them really know you at all. The sky's already starting to turn that lazy shade of gold again when you find yourself back at the block. Not for a job today, just maintenance. Quiet preparation. That's another thing people don't really talk about. Everyone sees the moment when the blade falls, but almost no one thinks about all the quiet mornings leading up to it. The days spent tending to the tools that make those moments possible. You pause for a long while, staring at the chopping block itself. It's an old thing. Heavy oak, darkened and scarred so deep, it looks like it's grown its own map of the town's history. If you traced each groove and notch with your finger, you could probably tell stories about each one. Some deeper than others. Some oddly shallow blades that didn't quite finish the job on the first try. That's why the block matters so much. It's not just a lump of wood, it's part of the process. It holds the weight of everything that happens here. Most towns replace theirs every few years, but this one? This block's been here long enough that even the mayor talks about it like an old relative, grim but reliable. You run your hand over the top slowly, feeling the roughness beneath your fingers, and check again that nothing's loose. Splinters can catch the edge of a blade in ways that make things messy. And a messy job means whispered curses, lost respect, maybe even riots. You've seen it happen elsewhere. One swing too many, and suddenly, the town questions the whole system. After the block, it's time for the tools themselves. The sword comes first. Yours isn't some fancy knight's blade with engravings and delicate filigree. It's a broad, heavy thing, designed for one purpose only: thick spine, razor-sharp edge, a little chipped here and there, despite your best efforts. That happens even with care. You keep it wrapped in oiled cloth, stored in a chest back at home. Not hung up like some kind of trophy. Not leaned in the corner like a walking stick. Hidden away like it's dangerous just sitting there in the room. Which, in a way, it is. Unwrapping the cloth is always a quiet ritual. You don't rush it. Cloth peeled back slowly, revealing steel that catches the light just so. For a moment, there's something strangely beautiful about it. Simple, honest. You run your thumb lightly along the flat edge. Not the sharp side, obviously, checking for any burrs or warping. Sharpening takes time. You use a stone, smooth and cool in your hand. Long, careful strokes. Back and forth, again and again. There's a rhythm to it that feels almost like meditation. You could probably do it with your eyes closed by now. And maybe you have once or twice on nights when the fire burned low and the world outside felt even quieter than usual. Historians sometimes ask why executioners didn't just use axes more often. After all, the big wood-cutting kind would seem like the obvious choice. But truth is, swords do the job cleaner. One clean slice, less splintering. Axes are for wood, not necks. Though you do have one of those tucked away as well, for the occasional stubborn job. It sits next to a smaller blade used for more delicate tasks. That's something most folks don't realize. Executioners handled more than just beheadings. Branding, mutilations, public floggings. You've got irons in the back shed for just that purpose. Long-handled, cruel-looking things with loops at the end, meant to heat over flame until they glow a dull, angry orange. It's been a while since you've had to use those. Not that you miss it. There's also the rope, stored coiled neatly on a wooden peg in the shed beside your house. Thick, scratchy hemp. You check it regularly for frays. A frayed rope means a bad drop, and a bad drop means, well, you'd rather not think too hard about that. You remember once visiting another town years back. Their executioner showed off his collection. Ropes dyed different colors, swords polished like mirrors, even a set of iron masks meant for public shaming. You'd thought it was a bit much, too flashy. Execution isn't theater, or at least it shouldn't be. Still, there is a certain showmanship expected now and then. You've learned to strike a certain figure when stepping into the square. Hood down, shoulder squared, sword held just so. There's comfort in that routine. Not just for you, but for everyone watching. It makes the horror feel controlled, predictable. Even the clothing matters. Your working outfit isn't just random rags. Thick leather apron. Dark woolen sleeves that don't show stains. You've spent time stitching and patching them yourself. No tailor in town wants that job. Once, someone offered you a new tunic in exchange for looking the other way on a case. You still have it folded in a chest, untouched. People might whisper about your tools. There's always some old grandmother muttering about cursed blades or haunted ropes. But really, the danger isn't in the tools themselves. It's in how they're used. Before every job, there's a moment where you stand alone by the block, sword in hand, testing the weight, making sure everything feels right. You swing it once, maybe twice, quietly. No audience. Just you, the block, and the early morning light slanting in through half-shuttered windows. It's in those moments that the job feels the heaviest. Not because of the violence, but because of the precision it demands. You can't afford to make mistakes. There are no second chances here. You clean everything carefully afterward. Sword wiped down with oil. Rope hung back up. Branding irons cooled in a bucket of water that hisses softly like some angry animal. The smell of hot metal and ash lingers in your clothes, no matter how many times you wash them. By the time all the tools are put away, the sun's fully risen. You step outside, stretching sore shoulders, and watch the town slowly waking up around you. Market stalls opening, children running down muddy lanes, a priest already pacing back and forth with his hands clasped tight in thought. And none of them really think about the tools you've just spent the morning with. The block, the blade, the rope. They just know you're the one who carries them. By midday, the market square pulses with life. Chickens squabble in rough wooden cages. Merchants shout about cloth. And salted fish and smoke curls from small cook fires. And through all of it, you walk, quiet, deliberate. As always, people step aside. You're not wearing the executioner's hood right now, just a plain wool cloak, but it doesn't matter. They know you. It's in the set of your shoulders, in the particular way your boots hit the cobblestones. Heavy, steady, as if each step carried more weight than the one before. No one says hello. No one offers you a fresh loaf or a jug of cider. You're essential to the town's survival, and yet you exist outside its walls in every way except geography. That's the part no one really prepares you for when the job falls into your lap. The silence. It isn't just the isolation after a hanging or a beheading. It's a daily, permanent thing. A kind of invisible wall built between you and everyone else. You notice it in 1,000 small ways. The way the baker leaves a loaf on the counter rather than placing it directly in your hand. The way the blacksmith sharpens your blade without a word, eyes fixed on the metal, never once meeting yours. Even the priest, who's supposed to offer comfort to all, keeps a safe distance, as if a blessing might lose its strength if it brushes too close to you. Historians sometimes puzzle over this. Why did executioners across Europe live such separate lives while still being part of the community? Was it superstition? Social order? Or just an unspoken agreement? Necessary monsters kept on the town's leash? You can answer that easily enough. It's all three. Your house sits just beyond the last row of cottages, past where the cobbled road turns to muddy tracks. Close enough to reach quickly when needed. Far enough that no one accidentally wanders by. It's not exile, exactly. It's placement, like storing poison on a high shelf. Most days, you keep to yourself. There's a small garden behind your house, a patch of dirt filled with onions, garlic, a few crooked carrots. Things that grow easily without much care. Things with strong smells that cling to your hands, masking others. There's no one to share the garden with, though. No friends visiting for a drink. No family waiting by the fire. You once thought about trying to start a family years ago. But in this role, it isn't practical. Who would marry the man everyone else crosses the street to avoid? Even the bravest girls eventually stop meeting your eye. Even the loneliest widows steer clear. Once, a new priest came to town, young, idealistic. He tried to speak to you after his first sermon, invited you to a meal at the rectory. The old priest pulled him aside before he could say too much. After that, the young man's glances became shorter, less certain. It always happens that way. Still, for all the loneliness, the town depends on you. You're not some outlaw hiding in the woods. You are part of the structure, a piece of the system that keeps the wheels turning. Without someone to carry out final sentences, laws lose their bite. People lose respect for them. And respect, in a place like this, is everything. You've seen what happens when there's no executioner. Towns where criminals linger too long in jails, or punishments are handed out by angry mobs rather than measured hands. It doesn't take long for things to collapse into chaos when that balance tips. When the mayor's bailiff comes knocking at your door, there's always a certain look in his eye. Tight, nervous, as if he's not sure whether to thank you or apologize for disturbing your peace. He usually doesn't stay long, just enough to hand over the order and make his way back into the safer parts of town. There's a strange power in that, quiet, steady power. You don't belong to any of the guilds. You don't wear a nobleman's crest. Yet people step aside when you walk past. Even the town's wealthiest merchants glance away as if your gaze might cost them coin. You remember one winter night standing on the edge of the harvest festival. Torches burning bright. Fiddlers playing quick, stumbling tunes. Couples laughing and spinning in wide circles. You stood there in your hood, sword slung across your back, not out of threat, just habit. And not one person called you over. The smell of roasted meat hung in the air. Pork, maybe lamb. You couldn't quite tell. And as the music built, as the dancers whirled faster, you felt that familiar aches settle in behind your ribs. Not loneliness exactly. Something quieter than that. Resignation, maybe. You turned and walked back toward home before the last song finished. Some executioners, you've heard, give up the role. They pack their tools and vanish into the woods, or try to blend into a new town far away. But the truth is, it never works. The job leaves its mark. It's in your walk, your hands, your eyes. People can sense it even if they don't know why. There's a rumor in some villages that executioners can't set foot inside churches. That if they try, the doors won't open. You know that's not strictly true. You've walked into the church more than once. Sat in the back pew, silent as always. No one stopped you. No lightning struck. But still, no one sat beside you either. You're caught in this strange middle place, banished yet essential, feared and relied upon in equal measure. Even the town's children know it. You've caught them peeking at you from behind barrels and shutters, wide-eyed, whispering, telling stories about the executioner in the woods, the man with the blood-stained boots. They make you taller, more terrible in their imaginations. A monster, a ghost, but the truth is simpler. You're just a man with a job no one else wants. A man who sharpens his sword by firelight, who tends a quiet garden, who waits in silence until the next name is called. By the time the sun sets and the market stalls close, you're already back at home, hanging up your cloak, sitting by the hearth. And out there, beyond the walls, the town sleeps easier knowing you're still here. By now, evening has settled like a slow breath across the town. The square is empty except for a few stray cats sniffing at what's left behind. Bits of bread crust, a fallen apple, someone's forgotten wooden spoon. Lanterns swing gently from doorposts. Candles glow faintly in shuttered windows. And you, as always, are walking home with that particular heaviness in your step. There's a weight not just in your arms or your back, but in your pockets. A purse tied tightly to your belt. Inside, the clink of silver coins. Payment for today's work, not wages. That's too clean a word for it. Blood money. Quiet compensation for services no one wants to talk about. It's one of the oddest truths about your life. The richer you become, the more alone you feel. Executioners don't live poorly. Far from it. Towns make sure of that. If your purse ran dry, if your cupboards emptied, the work might lose its precision. And precision is everything when someone's neck is on the block. When you get home, you lay the purse on the table by the fire. Untie the knot. Count each coin slowly, letting them spill across the rough wood surface like water from a cracked barrel. There's something meditative about it, a way to mark time. The weight of the coins in your hand tells you exactly how valuable the town thinks a life is. Or rather, how valuable they think it is to end one. A large execution, say, a nobleman's son caught in treason earns you more. Sometimes 3 or 4 times the usual rate. Smaller offenses, petty theft, public brawls that go too far earn less. But even the lightest job still pays. The mayor once said it plainly, years ago. If we expect a man to carry such burdens, we must lighten them with silver. Easy words for someone who never has to swing the sword himself. The coins aren't always new. You've learned to read their history just by touch. Some are heavy and stamped with fresh faces. Others are worn thin from years of trade, edges smooth like river stones. Every so often, you find something stranger in the mix. Foreign coins from travelers executed far from home. A mark from some distant city you'll never see. There's also barter, more often than people realize. You've come home to find sides of pork leaning against your door, barrels of ale, olts of wool dyed in colors you'd never afford otherwise. And then there are the quiet bribes. The money left not for a job already done, but for one perhaps to be done slightly differently. A man's brother slipping you a pouch at night, asking for a quicker blade. A merchant's wife leaving a bundle by your garden gate, hoping her husband might avoid the noose altogether. You keep a separate chest for those coins, locked and hidden beneath the floorboards. It's not so much about morality, it's about accounting. Bribes and payments can't mix. One is official, the other less so. Historians sometimes debate whether executioners truly profited from their work. Some records show wealth accumulated over years. Others suggest it was a constant cycle of gain and loss, coins spent as quickly as they came in. You can confirm both are true. The money's there, yes, but there's always something to spend it on. Tools, clothing, repairs, the quiet costs of a life spent at the town's edge. And then there are the luxuries. The small things that remind you, in your loneliest moments, that at least the job brings more than just silence. A warm cloak lined with fur, a silver buckle, a book, rare and expensive, that you read by firelight long after the rest of the town sleeps. You own things no simple farmer could afford, and yet no one would ever envy you for it. There's a saying in town, better a poor man with a clean soul than a rich one with red hands. You've heard it whispered more than once, maybe even started it yourself once, half drunk on bad ale. But there it is, the core of it. Counting your money, you feel both pride and weariness. The coins are heavy, yes, but not nearly as heavy as the reputation that comes with them. When the counting's done, you pack the money away, some into a small locked box beneath your bed, some tucked into the lining of your cloak. Always divided, always hidden. You've learned that keeping your wealth quiet is part of surviving in this role. Flaunt it too much, build a grand house, buy a fine horse, and people start asking questions. Start looking too closely at how exactly you've earned it all. You think back on the oddest payment you ever received. A carved ring set with a single black stone, given by a man who knew he wouldn't survive the morning. His last request was simple. Keep it, he'd said, voice shaking. Better on your hand than buried in the dirt. You've worn it ever since, not as a trophy, more as a reminder. A quiet weight on your finger when the fire burns low and the wind howls against the shutters. Even now, as you sit back in your chair, boots off, sword leaning against the wall, you feel that subtle pull of silver in your pockets and across your home. Proof that your work matters. Proof that, despite the silence and the stares, the town cannot do without you. Still, some nights, you wonder what it would feel like to live with empty hands instead. No blade, no coin, just a quiet life in the market square, selling bread or cloth. But those thoughts pass as quickly as they come. You pour yourself a measure of wine, cheap, sharp stuff that stings the tongue, and settle in to watch the fire crackle low. Outside, the town sleeps under a blanket of clouds. The square stands empty again, the block waiting, the tools resting. And somewhere in the mayor's hall, your name sits written in a ledger, not as a citizen, but as a cost. By now, years have passed, and you've learned that time in a medieval town doesn't move forward. It circles, seasons repeat, faces age. Only the rumors grow heavier with each cycle. At first, when you took up this role, there were simple looks, people stepping aside in the street, men adjusting their hats and looking down, women pulling children to the far side of the market stall. But over time, avoidance turns into something heavier. Stories begin. Not just whispered warnings to avoid your shadow, but entire myths wrapped around your name like a secondhood. You walk through the square one morning, as you always do, boots grinding against cobblestone damp with last night's rain. The market is full of color and sound. Vegetables stacked high, wheels of hard cheese split open, thick slabs of salt pork hanging from hooks. Yet everywhere you step, there's an invisible line around you. No one crosses it. Even dogs slink to the side, noses down. It isn't just fear, it's weight. Your name carries too much of it now. Children are the worst for it. They're curious by nature, especially the little ones who don't yet know what fear costs. You'll catch their eyes following you as you pass by. Some wide-eyed, some grinning in that sly, testing way children have, trying to see if you really match the stories they've heard. Their mothers always notice too late. A sharp tug on the sleeve, a quick whispered scolding. He'll take you away if you stare. You've heard more than once in passing. Step in his shadow and he'll never grow tall. It's nonsense, of course. But in towns like this, nonsense holds power. At first, those kinds of rumors bothered you. You used to keep your hood lower, your boots quieter, as if shrinking yourself might help. But years in this life teach you, shrinking doesn't change a thing. The stories will always fill in whatever silence you leave behind. Historians sometimes argue over whether medieval executioners cultivated their reputations on purpose, whether they leaned into fear as a kind of self-protection. The truth is simpler. Reputation builds like dust in an old house. You can wipe it away, but the next morning, it's already back. And sometimes, it's easier just to let it pile up. There's a rhythm to how it happens. A man is sentenced. You perform your duty. The town watches. Then afterward, as people return to their homes and wipe their hands clean, they begin to speak, not about the crime, but about you. The cut of your blade, the way you moved, the quietness of your steps. Every detail becomes larger in the retelling. You've overheard them. Men sitting outside the tavern, tankards in hand, arguing over how many heads you've taken in a single swing. Some say 2. Others claim 3, though anyone with sense knows that's impossible. But the point isn't accuracy. It's atmosphere. Fear grows best in the gaps between facts. Your house, sitting as it does at the edge of town, becomes another part of the legend. No one ever visits uninvited. No one ever comes knocking after sunset. Yet somehow, offerings still appear at your door. Bundles of herbs, folded scraps of cloth, once even a carved figurine shaped like a crow. Protection charms, warnings, or both. Even your possessions carry weight. Your sword, for example. It's just steel, broad-bladed, meant for clean work. Yet you've seen men glance at it like it might move on its own. You keep it oiled and wrapped in cloth, but even that simple ritual takes on a kind of ceremonial feel in town gossip. The strangest part is how wealth doesn't shield you from it. If anything, your quiet accumulation of silver and goods makes it worse. Most men show their success. New boots, finer cloaks, bright rings on their fingers. You don't. Flash invites questions. And executioners do not invite questions. When you walk through the churchyard once a week, because yes, you do walk through the churchyard, despite what the priest's silence might imply, there are always lingering glances. Some say a man like you shouldn't stand on holy ground, yet no one tells you to leave. They just watch, always watch. There's an old woman in town, a widow with silver hair plaited into a long braid, who claims she saw you speak to ravens one winter. Says you fed them scraps of bread and spoke in a language she couldn't understand. The story spreads as stories do. Soon it's not just bread, it's whispers, secrets, promises. By spring, you've become the man who speaks to crows. Of course, none of it's true. Yet somehow, the story serves its purpose. thieves avoid your garden. Drunks keep their distance. It becomes a form of quiet armor. Still, reputation isn't only a shield. It's a weight. You carry it in your steps, in the lines carved across your face, in the ache in your shoulders each morning when you roll out of bed, joints stiff from years of quiet violence. You know how people speak of you when your back is turned. And there are times, sitting by the fire at night, when that knowledge sits heavier than the blade across your lap. The strangest weight comes not from fear, but from trust of a particular kind. Quiet, desperate trust. There are always those who find their way to your door in the dead of night. A merchant's apprentice, eyes wide with panic, confessing he stole coins from his master and begging for advice. A noble servant, trembling as she whispers about poison in the wine cellar. They don't go to the mayor. They don't go to the priest. They come to you, because even in fear, your role carries authority. The man who takes life understands what it means to lose it. And so, slowly, your reputation folds into something larger than the job. Not just executioner, arbiter, confessor, judge of quiet things. You never ask for payment when these midnight visitors come. It isn't about money. It's about balance. If the town gives you its silence, its distance, then at least it gives you its secrets too. By now, even your own face feels like part of the mask. You see it reflected sometimes in the dark surface of water barrels, or in the polished steel of your sword. Not young anymore. Lines carved deep around your mouth and eyes. Yet always the same steady, expressionless set. Hood up or down, it doesn't matter. You have become the figure they expect to see. There's a saying in town now, the headsman's eyes see twice. What that means exactly depends on who's telling it. Some say you see both life and death. Others claim you can spot guilt before a man even speaks. But the truth is simpler. You've seen enough to know that every man carries both mercy and cruelty in him. Even the softest face can hide a sharp blade. And maybe that's the real reason the town keeps its distance. Not because they fear your tools, but because they fear the part of themselves that might one day need them. By twilight, you find yourself walking the square again, boots echoing on stone, shops closed, torches burning low, and somewhere in the distance, church bells tolling slow and heavy. You pause beside the chopping block, scarred, darkened oak that holds the marks of your work as surely as your hands do. You rest your fingers lightly on its surface, tracing the familiar grooves. No one's watching now, no crowd, no whispers. Just you and the quiet weight of everything you've become. You stand there until the last bell fades into silence, then turn back toward home, boots crunching softly in the dirt. And behind you, even with no one there to see it, your reputation follows, step for step, shadow for shadow, an invisible companion that never truly leaves your side. Years slip by, measured not in grand events or public announcements, but in the steady rhythm of ordinary days. For you, time has never been marked by celebrations or milestones. It has always been counted in smaller, quieter ways. How many times you have sharpened your blade, how many coins you have stored away, and how many faces have watched you from behind the safety of a crowd. Eventually, there comes a morning when you rise before dawn, as you have done every day for decades, only to realize there is no reason to continue. The sword, once as familiar as the weight of your own arm, remains wrapped in its oiled cloth beneath the bed. The rope, coiled neatly in its box, sits untouched. No knock comes at your door. No mayor's order waits on your threshold. The work has passed to someone else. There is no formal farewell, no ceremony in the square. The town does not gather to mark your final execution or to thank you for years of service. Executioners do not receive retirement feasts or commemorative plaques. Instead, you fade from daily notice as slowly and inevitably as a candle burning low. One morning, the market bell rings, and you simply do not step out to meet it. You fall into a new rhythm. Mornings spent tending your small garden, where rows of garlic and onions grow quietly beneath the same sky that once watched your blade rise and fall. Afternoons walking the edge of the square, boots moving at a pace slower than before, not because of hesitation, but because there is finally no need to hurry. The town has not changed much. The faces grow older. The wooden shutters gain a few more cracks. The bell's tone is slightly duller now, worn smooth by years of wind. Yet its people still carry the same habits. Even in retirement, when you walk past the bakery or pause near the blacksmith's forge, men still look down. Women still pull their children closer. The fear lingers, softened perhaps by time, but never fully gone. You watch as a younger man takes up your place. His shoulders are broader, his steps heavier. He walks too quickly, lacking the careful stillness that years of practice teach. From a distance, you observe him in the square, setting his blade on the block, tightening the rope with practiced but impatient hands. It will take him years to learn what you now know. That precision in this work is not about speed or force, but about quiet control. At home, you keep your tools locked away. The sword remains in its chest, wrapped in the same cloth. The rope and branding irons stay in their places, neither polished nor displayed. Executioners do not pass their tools to apprentices. There is no formal guild or training. The blade waits for the next man who must carry it, untouched by ceremony. The wealth you gathered over the years remains hidden in careful places. Silver coins tucked into hollow spaces beneath floorboards, stitched into the linings of old cloaks, wrapped in oilcloth and buried beneath the garden's edge. It is more than enough to live quietly. Yet, you do not flaunt it. No grand house replaces your simple wooden one. No fine horse stands tethered outside your door. Reputation, even in retirement, requires quiet maintenance. You notice over time that a few villagers grow bolder. A nod from the baker's apprentice. A half-spoken greeting from a young mother who never knew you during the height of your work. But they do not step close. No one asks about the years you spent at the block. No one inquires about the exact number of names that passed through your hands. That silence is part of the arrangement. The town needed you then, and it still needs the memory of you now, even if no one dares speak it aloud. On certain nights, when the moon is high and silver bright over the square, you light a single candle and sit by your window. The chair creaks beneath you, worn smooth by years of quiet evenings. You watch the younger executioner returning home, his blade wrapped, his head bowed. The torches lining the square flicker in the wind, and for a moment you almost reach for your own hood, as if the past might call you back to the square once more. But the moment passes. Historians often debate what became of men like you. Some records mention executioners who vanished from their towns, living out their final years as beggars or recluses in the hills. Others describe quiet deaths, unmarked graves, names erased from the town's official ledgers. The truth, as you live it now, is neither exile nor legend. It is simply this: you remain where you have always been, at the edge of things. You visit the churchyard more often now. No one stops you. No one questions your place. You walk between the stones, reading names carved into weathered marble and wood. Names you once knew. Names of men whose sentences you carried out. Names of families who once left bread or silver at your door in uneasy thanks. Your house grows quieter with each passing season. The roof creaks under heavy winter snow. The garden grows wilder in spring. You tend it still, though your hands ache more than they once did. The years weigh differently now, no longer in the strength of your arms, but in the steady pull of your steps. One evening, as the sun sets in slow streaks of gold and red over the square, you take a final walk, past the market stalls, past the blacksmith's forge, past the block, now newer, pale wood, stained only slightly with the first marks of the man who has taken your place. No one speaks to you as you pass. Yet you feel the eyes following. Quiet, respectful, not quite afraid, but not quite familiar either. You pause at the block, resting your hand lightly on its edge. The wood feels different beneath your palm. Less worn, less scarred, but still waiting for the same purpose. There is no farewell to say, no speech to offer. The work continues, just not with your hands. When you return home that night, you do not light the fire. You sit instead by the window, watching as the stars rise, sharp and clear against the black sky. The candle burns low beside you, flickering shadows against the wall. And so, the executioner's story closes without farewell. Not in flame, not in frost, but in quiet. A steady drift into legend, half remembered by the town, fully understood only by those who once watched you work. Yet, as one chapter ends, another waits just beyond. While your blade rests and the block stands silent, there are still darker corners of history waiting to unfold. The next story begins in stone halls and royal courts, not with a single name, but with many, an entire order of knights summoned not for glory, but for judgment. Betrayed not by commoners, but by kings. Now, as the fire fades and the candle's last light flickers away, let us leave the quiet home of the executioner behind. Our path leads next to the heart of medieval power, where whispered accusations turn into public trials, and the weight of a single confession can bring down empires. You find yourself summoned not by a town crier or a bailiff, but by royal decree. A letter arrives on horseback, its seal pressed into deep red wax, bearing the unmistakable crest of the king. The courier does not hand it to you directly. He places it on your doorstep, as if the parchment itself carries weight heavier than silver. When you unroll it, the message is clear and unsettling. You are required to present yourself at the royal court in Paris. The year is 1307, and something far larger than a local execution or village judgment is in motion. It is not a single man facing justice this time, but an entire brotherhood, a Knights Templar. It is not entirely clear why you have been called, perhaps as a witness, perhaps as an observer, perhaps for your skill in carrying out sentences when ordinary hands will not suffice. Whatever the reason, there is no refusing the king's command. You pack what little you need, a traveling cloak, coin for the road, and a blade that has seen more winters than most men in your town. The journey to Paris stretches over days. Muddy roads winding through damp forests. Fields turning gold beneath the autumn sky. Villages appearing like dark smudges on the horizon, and fading again as your horse's hooves carry you onward. The rhythm of travel settles into your bones, slower than the life you have left behind, but no less certain. By the time the city's walls rise before you, the sky is thick with mist. Paris is no quiet market town. It breathes like a living thing. Carts clattering over stone bridges, voices echoing beneath tall windows, banners snapping in the wind. And above it all, looming over both noble and peasant alike, stands the royal palace, cold stone and sharp angles, as unyielding as the laws it represents. You present the letter to the guards. They read it without a word, eyes flickering once to the blade strapped to your back. Then, with a sharp motion, they wave you through. Inside, the air smells of oil lamps, iron hinges, and polished wood worn smooth by generations of boots and wheels. Historians often debate what these early trials looked like. Were they quiet affairs, held in secret chambers behind thick doors? Or were they grand spectacles, open to the public, meant to display royal power in full force? As you walk deeper into the heart of the palace, the answer becomes clear. This is no hushed proceeding. The halls buzz with activity. Courtiers in heavy velvet, guards in mail and polished helms, clerks bent over stacks of parchment. There is a crackling energy in the air, sharp as a drawn blade. Word has spread already. The Knights Templar, once untouchable, have been summoned to answer for their alleged crimes. You are escorted into a grand hall where the trial's first proceedings will unfold. The ceiling arches high above, ribbed with dark beams like the bones of some enormous creature. Rows of benches stretch along the walls, already filled with whispering nobles and curious scribes. At the far end, the king's dais stands beneath a heavy tapestry embroidered with golden lily. It is there you see them for the first time, the accused. Rows of men wearing the distinctive white mantles of the Templar order, now stained and rumpled, stripped of their weapons and dignity. Some stand tall, faces impassive. Others stare at the floor. It is strange seeing them like this. You have always known the Templars as symbols of power, soldiers, guardians of relics, protectors of pilgrimage routes. But now, they are simply prisoners. The charges are read aloud in a voice sharp enough to carry across the hall. Heresy, idolatry, blasphemy, crimes, spoken so plainly they almost lose their meaning through repetition. You watch as scribes dip their quills into ink, recording each accusation with steady hands. You know better than to trust the surface of such proceedings. The rhythm of a trial is like the rhythm of the block. Calm on the outside, dangerous underneath. Political weight presses against every word spoken here. The king's need for wealth, the church's need for control, and the Templars caught between both forces like a condemned man caught between blade and rope. The Grand Master of the Order, Jacques de Molay, stands among them. His face is carved with the lines of age and command. His eyes sweep the hall once, resting briefly on yours. It is not recognition, but something close. Perhaps he knows the kind of man you are. Perhaps he understands the role you play here, even if you do not yet fully understand it yourself. By late afternoon, the hall's air grows heavy. Lamps are lit along the walls, casting flickering shadows across the stone floor. The first testimonies are read, not from the accused themselves, but from secret witnesses, names unspoken, identities protected by royal order. It is a careful dance, accusation layered upon accusation, building a structure too large to ignore. You remain standing by the far wall, silent and steady, an observer among observers. Yet there is no mistaking your presence. More than one pair of eyes flickers your way. Clerks, guards, even nobles wrapped in furs and jewels. Your reputation has traveled ahead of you, crossing more miles than your horse ever could. Historians still debate whether these trials were genuine or merely performance. You can see now, with your own eyes, that they are both. There is truth here, buried beneath layers of fear and ambition. But there is also theater, lines rehearsed, verdicts decided before the ink dries on the first confession. By evening, as the candles gutter low and the last witness is dismissed, you are led away to private quarters within the palace. Not a cell, but not exactly comfort either. A narrow room with a bed, a basin, and a single barred window overlooking the darkened city below. You sit by the window, watching torchlight dance along the palace walls. There is no execution scheduled yet, no sentence passed, but you can feel it coming. The weight gathering in the air is as familiar to you as the feel of a blade in your hand. Before you lie down, you run your fingers lightly over the handle of your sword, resting against the wall beside you. The leather grip is worn smooth, a familiar companion in unfamiliar halls. As the city sleeps, you wonder how many of these men will live to see another dawn. And tomorrow, when the court resumes, you will be there again, waiting, watching, as the slow machinery of royal justice grinds forward, sharp as any blade you have ever carried. Morning in the royal court does not begin with roosters or church bells. It begins with footsteps, dozens upon dozens of footsteps, echoing off cold stone as clerks, guards, priests, and noblemen fill the halls. You wake early, not out of habit, but because sleep is restless in a place like this. The window above your bed glows faintly gray. a sky heavy with mist and waiting rain. When you return to the great hall, little has changed from the day before, except that the air feels heavier. It is not the weight of bodies, though there are plenty of them gathered again, but something quieter, a thick layering of tension, like frost, coating a field before the first light touches it. The accused stand once more along the far side of the hall. This time, more knights have joined their number. Fresh faces, some still showing bruises from recent arrests. Their mantles hang awkwardly now, creases sharp where they were folded in haste, red crosses dull against pale cloth. And then it begins, not in whispers this time, but in full voice. A priest steps forward, holding a scroll long enough to trail slightly as he moves. He unrolls it with a practiced flick of his hands, revealing a list so long that it almost seems theatrical. The charges against the Knights Templar are read aloud, one by one, in slow and deliberate cadence. Idolatry, heresy, spitting on the cross, worshipping false idols, engaging in forbidden rites, denying Christ, secret gatherings at midnight, financial corruption, conspiracy against the king. The words pile up like stones in a wall, each one fitting tightly against the next. You have witnessed many trials before, both formal and rough, from village squares to town halls. But never have you seen accusations stack like this, layer upon layer, until the truth becomes nearly irrelevant beneath the sheer volume of claims. The audience murmurs as each charge is spoken. Some nobles furrow their brows. Others lean forward with sharp interest, as if savoring each new revelation. You remain still, watching, measuring. You know better than to believe all of it. The rhythm of falsehood is familiar to you. It is in the pauses between sentences, the careful pace of a man who has practiced his speech many times before. Some accusations are believable, echoing things whispered about secret societies for years, but others strain credibility. Worshipping a disembodied head preserved in silver? Kissing unfamiliar objects in candlelit ceremonies? Even in your line of work, which deals in harsh reality, some things sound too outlandish to hold weight. Yet here, in this grand hall, the truth is less important than appearance. The scroll keeps unrolling. The priest's voice remains steady. Heresy, treason, blasphemy, each word like a hammer, blow against the silent men standing before him. Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master, stands unmoving. His face betrays nothing. It is a kind of strength you recognize, the same quiet stillness you once practiced in your own work, sharpening a blade or standing before a restless crowd. Historians today wonder whether the Templars were truly guilty of the things laid at their feet. You stand in the room where those very accusations first gathered momentum, and you know instinctively that many of them cannot be true. But proving innocence means little in a trial shaped not by law, but by power. After the formal charges are read, the individual testimonies begin. Witnesses are called forth. Some wear the robes of common merchants or pilgrims. Others are lower-ranking knights, men whose faces betray a mixture of fear and calculation. One by one, they step onto the stone platform at the hall's center. Each offers their version of events. A former Templar claims he saw secret rituals by torchlight. A clerk confesses to forging letters under the Grand Master's orders. A stable hand tells a stumbling story about strange symbols scratched into the walls of the Templar stronghold. Not all these testimonies carry weight. Some contradict others. Names shift, details blur. But that does not seem to trouble the scribes lining the walls, their quills moving steadily, capturing every word without pause. You stand back, leaning against one of the hall's great wooden beams. There is no seat reserved for you, no special title announced. Yet you feel the eyes watching, both from the accused and from the royal court. You are a presence here now, not merely an observer, but a silent tool waiting in the shadows, should sharper justice be required. By midday, the hall grows stifling. Lamps smoke slightly from the damp air. The floor beneath your boots feels sticky with oil and wax dripped from countless torches. The accusations keep coming. A steady parade, as relentless as rain. One knight, younger than the rest, breaks during his testimony. His voice cracks. His knees buckle. Guards catch him before he can fall fully, pulling him back into line like a puppet whose strings have slipped. You have seen that before, too. A man pushed just far enough to bend, but not quite break. There is something in that moment that stays with you. You wonder whether, back in your village, someone is watching the square and missing your steady steps. Whether the absence of your presence there leaves its own echo, the way a blade leaves a line even after the cut has healed. The afternoon drags on, and the parade of accusations continues. Financial crimes now. Accusations of hidden treasuries buried beneath the temple in Jerusalem. Claims of forbidden alliances with Saracen leaders. It is not simply about heresy anymore. The king's interest is clear. Wealth, control. Removing the Templars means absorbing their power and their treasure. The day ends not with a verdict, but with exhaustion. The court disperses slowly. Nobles in heavy cloaks stepping carefully down stone stairs. Scribes packing away parchment. Guards shifting their spears and yawning behind their helms. You are led again to your quarters, the same narrow room with its single barred window. Before sleep, you sit by the window, watching Paris darken into mist. The Templars' faces linger in your mind, not as grand figures or symbols, but as men, tired, silent, braced against something larger than themselves. You wonder whether tomorrow's accusations will feel heavier or simply louder. The machinery of judgment grinds on, and as always, you will be there to witness it. The third morning of the trial begins before the city's bells ring, before the sun has fully risen to warm the gray slate roofs of Paris. A knock wakes you, 3 deliberate raps on the wooden door of your small, stone-walled room. It is not the knock of a servant or a nervous scribe. It is a guard's knock, hard enough to echo slightly through the stone corridor beyond. You rise quietly, pulling on your heavier cloak against the morning chill. There is no need to ask where you are being taken today. You already know. The court no longer requires mere observation. The time for reading accusations and gathering polite testimonies has passed. What comes next is inevitable in royal justice. You have seen it before in quieter towns, in village jails, and under church basements. Now it will happen on a grander scale, with larger consequences. Confessions will not be asked for. They will be forced. The guards lead you through corridors that slope gradually downward. Each step takes you deeper beneath the palace, away from the light of torches flickering high in gilded sconces, away from polished floors and rich tapestries. You descend into stone corridors where the walls are damp and raw, where the smell shifts from candle smoke and oil to something heavier. Cold iron, old water trapped in the crevices of flagstones, worn uneven by years of pacing feet. At the base of the stairs stands a door that looks older than the rest of the palace, iron-bound with thick rivets and a lock large enough to secure a castle gate. Beside it waits a priest, robed in black, a narrow book tucked beneath one arm and a long candle already lit in the other hand. His face is pale, not from fear, but from long familiarity with this place. He nods to the guards, then to you, saying only, "It is time." No further explanation is needed. The door is unbolted with a sound that grinds through the stone like the turn of a mill wheel. You step inside first, the air colder still, carrying the metallic edge of old blood and damp straw. The chamber is exactly what you expected it would be. A wide, low-ceilinged room with walls of bare stone and no windows. It is not like the rough holding cells of village jails. This place is crafted with care and grim purpose. Every feature is deliberate. Against one wall stands a rack, its wooden frame darkened with age, ropes looped through iron pulleys ready to stretch and bind. A brazier sits nearby, its coals glowing faintly, heating iron tongs and branding tools that rest neatly beside it. Heavy chains hang from iron rings bolted into the walls, some worn shiny, where wrists and ankles have rubbed away rust. There is a wooden table as well, not for prisoners, but for recording confessions, its surface already marked with drips of ink and smudges, where clerks have rested their elbows for hours on end. Historians often question how organized medieval torture chambers truly were. Some records suggest crude, makeshift rooms used only when needed. Others describe something closer to what stands before you now. A carefully maintained space, built not merely for punishment, but as a structured extension of the royal court itself. In this place, pain is not chaos. It is administration. 2 men are already chained against the far wall. Templar knights, stripped down to plain tunics, bare feet on cold stone. Their faces are pale beneath the flickering torchlight, not with fresh terror, but with a settled, resigned fear. They know what is coming. You watch without speaking as the guards secure the first man to the rack, tying his wrists and ankles with practiced precision. The pulleys creak as they tighten, the rope stretching until the knight's arms extend unnaturally above his head, his back arching slightly against the wooden frame. The priest steps forward now, murmuring a quiet prayer in Latin as he opens his book. His voice is steady. This is not an act of cruelty in his mind. It is a sacred duty, a necessary step in the process of securing confessions deemed vital to both church and crown. There is no hesitation in his movements, no tremor in his voice. You stand still by the door, your hands folded quietly in front of you, sword untouched at your side. You are not brought here to turn the rack or heat the irons. You are here as a witness, a presence meant to ensure that when the final moment comes, when the court demands execution rather than mere confession, the proper man will be ready to carry it out. Even now, as you watch, you feel the weight of that responsibility settle deeper into your shoulders. The guards begin turning the rack's handle. Slowly, notch by notch, the pulleys tighten. The knight's body stretches in small increments, muscles taut as bowstrings, face contorting against the inevitable. At first, he makes no sound. You can see the effort in every line of his jaw, clenched teeth grinding against each other. But as the rack continues its work, the first cry tears loose. Not a sharp scream, but a low, guttural sound that echoes strangely in the enclosed space. You have heard this sound before, in other towns, in other rooms. It does not move you in the way it once might have. Not out of callousness, but out of understanding. Pain in this room is not about cruelty. It is about structure, about control. The knight begins to speak after several turns, voice ragged and broken. His confessions spill out in fragments at first, phrases in Latin, names spoken haltingly, accusations against others within the order. Each word is recorded carefully by the priest at the table, his quill scratching steadily across the parchment. There is no questioning the validity of these statements. That has already been decided elsewhere, in rooms far above this one where kings and cardinals weigh matters not in truth, but in gold and politics. Once the first man's voice fails entirely, he is unbound, carried from the chamber on a stretcher, his limbs hanging loosely, head lolling back with eyes half shut. Another knight takes his place. This one younger, face bruised already from earlier questioning. His turn on the rack is shorter. His voice breaks sooner. The rhythm of confession becomes as steady as the turning of the handle itself. Statement after statement recorded, ink drying in thin, pale lines on the priest's pages. By late morning, the chamber is thick with the scent of sweat and smoke from the brazier. The iron tools remain untouched today, though their heat pulses steadily in the corner, a quiet threat waiting if word should fail. The work is methodical. 2 more men are brought in, and each meets the same process. You observe all of it, standing as still as a carved figure in the corner, eyes steady, breath slow. When the final confession is signed, and the guards begin clearing the chamber, you step forward for the first time. You say nothing, but your presence alone speaks volumes. Even the priest looks up from his book briefly, acknowledging you with a slow nod before blotting the final line of ink and closing his parchment. The room empties, leaving only the echo of chains clinking softly against stone and the faint, persistent smell of burned iron. You walk back up the stairs in silence, escorted once more by guards who do not speak unless absolutely required. At the top of the steps, daylight filters through narrow windows. Paris sprawls below, mist curling above rooftops like ghostly banners. The palace above still hums with quieter business, clerks reading scrolls, courtiers adjusting their collars, servants carrying trays of wine and ink. It is as if nothing at all had happened below. That is the weight of royal justice. Its darkest work is done in shadow, so that the surface may remain smooth and unbroken. By the time you reach your room again, the guards close the door behind you with the same quiet finality. You sit down on the edge of the bed, boots still on, staring for a long while at the barred window that frames the city's edge. You know the confessions gathered today will be read aloud tomorrow in the Great Hall. Names will be spoken, crimes declared official. And as always, when the final moment comes, it will not be the court's words that carry weight. It will be yours. By the time the next morning arrives, Paris is wrapped in cold mist that clings to every rooftop and tower, spire like a heavy, gray curtain. From your window, the city looks quieter than usual, though you know that inside the palace walls, the machine of royal justice has not paused. It merely moves in silence until the next public moment. Today will be one of those moments. The confessions gathered in the chambers below are to be read aloud in the Great Hall, not as rumors, not as whispered accusations, but as official record. You dress carefully, pulling your heavier cloak across your shoulders, fastening the clasp beneath your throat with the slow, steady hands of someone long used to preparing for solemn work. The sword remains at your side, wrapped but visible. By now, everyone within the palace knows who you are. No one questions your presence. No one asks whether you belong. When you step into the hall, it is already half filled with people. Nobles in fine robes trimmed with fur, clerks seated with ink and parchment, guards lining the walls in double rows. The air smells of damp wool, smoke from dozens of torches, and the faint lingering sharpness of heated iron carried up from the lower levels. At the far end, as before, stand the accused. The Templar knights have been dressed in their mantles again, though the fabric is stained and wrinkled now, lacking the crisp edges of pride and ceremony. Jacques de Molay is among them, his face calm but impossibly pale. His eyes meet yours across the room once more. No recognition, not exactly, but the steady look of a man who understands that he is not simply facing judgment. He is becoming part of a record that will outlive both him and his accusers. The reading begins with the same measured formality as a church service. A clerk steps forward, unrolling a scroll with deliberate care. His voice echoes against the high vaulted ceiling, slow and clear. One by one, the confessions gathered in the torture chamber are read aloud. Each name is announced first, then the crime, then the precise words spoken under questioning. I, Gerard de Villers, do confess that I have seen and participated in secret rites, wherein the cross of our Lord was denied. I, Hugo de Payens, do confess to worshipping an idol shaped as a man's head, crowned with silver. Each statement is followed by a pause, just long enough for the audience to absorb it. No one speaks. No one shifts in their seat. Even the guards remain unnaturally still, as if the weight of the words alone holds them in place. You have heard confessions before, in quieter rooms, with no audience but a priest and a scribe. But here, spoken aloud before both nobility and commoner, these same confessions become something else entirely. They transform into history. Historians often wonder how much of these confessions were recorded exactly as they were spoken. You can see now, with your own eyes, how the process unfolds. The clerk does not read everything. Phrases are smoothed, details sharpened or softened, depending on what best suits the moment. A simple admission of fear becomes a grand statement of guilt. A halting name given under duress becomes a full list of conspirators. The priest who oversaw the torture stands beside the clerk, head bowed slightly, a silent figure of authority. His presence confirms the authenticity of the records. But even he does not speak. His work is already done. Now it is the written word that carries the blade. You notice the scribes seated along the side walls, dozens of them, each one capturing the reading in real time. They write with astonishing speed, heads bent low, quills scratching against parchment. These are not mere clerks. They are royal historians, tasked with ensuring that no detail is lost, that no corner of the trial remains unofficial. As the morning stretches toward midday, the scrolls continue unrolling. More names, more crimes, more quiet nods from the gathered nobles. Occasionally, one of the accused speaks out, denying a confession, calling the record false, but they are silenced quickly. A gesture from the guards, a word from the clerk. Their voices vanish as easily as candles snuffed out by wind. You watch all of this not as a participant, but as part of the structure. Your presence is as much a signal as the royal banners hanging from the rafters. It tells the audience that these words have consequences, that behind each written line waits the certainty of a sword or a noose. It is not simply theater. It is a declaration of power. By early afternoon, the readings pause briefly. Servants move through the hall with trays of wine and bread, not as a celebration, but as a practical necessity. The nobles must be sustained if they are to witness history properly. You remain standing by your usual post, accepting nothing, eating nothing. This is not your feast. It never has been. When the reading resumes, the content shifts slightly. Now, instead of individual confessions, the scrolls contain financial records. Ledgers seized from Templar strongholds. Lists of properties, treasuries, silver reserves, and secret holdings. The hall stirs more at these details than it did at any whispered heresy. It is one thing to accuse a knight of spitting on the cross. It is quite another to discover his order owns half the grain stores in northern France. You observe the nobles leaning forward now, their eyes sharper, their whispers louder. The trial has always been about power. Now that truth is laid bare. By naming these holdings publicly, the crown makes its claim to them clear. No longer hidden wealth, no longer untouchable. Everything is being gathered onto the record, like stones into a fortress wall. The Grand Master stands as still as ever, but his shoulders have tightened. You recognize the tension. It is the same quiet resistance you have seen in condemned men, just before the blade falls. There is no escape left. Only the final moments before the inevitable end. As the last scroll is read aloud, the clerk pauses, looking up toward the king's dais. There is no formal verdict given today. That will come later, after the necessary ceremonies have been observed. But everyone in the room knows what is coming next. The trial is no longer about whether the Templars are guilty. It is about ensuring that their guilt is preserved in ink and memory. The hall begins to empty slowly. Nobles rising in small groups, servants collecting empty cups and discarded crusts of bread. The accused are led away in chains, their heads bowed now, mantles dragging against the stone floor. You do not follow immediately. Instead, you remain for a moment longer, standing at the edge of the dais, watching as the last scrolls are gathered and placed into heavy chests, bound with iron clasps. These records will travel. They will be sent to other courts, to the Vatican, to other kings across Europe. Long after the men themselves are gone, their confessions will live on. It is a strange kind of immortality, one you know well. In your own work, You have written no names, but you have made your mark all the same. One man at a time, one name after another. Silent records carved not in ink, but in memory. When you finally step back into the outer corridors, Paris feels colder. The sky is darker now, as if the day itself had shifted under the weight of everything spoken inside those stone walls. You walk slowly, boots echoing against the flagstones. Not because you are tired, but because you know that the heaviest part of the trial is yet to come. The confessions have been gathered, the secrets made public. Now, the court must decide what to do with them. And as always, it will not be words that deliver the final judgment. It will be steel. The trial of the Knights Templar, for all its grandeur and formality, was never truly about justice. You understand this with sharp clarity by the time the 4th week of proceedings begins. The confessions have been gathered, the scrolls sealed and carried to chambers where they will become part of official royal archives. Yet the hall still fills each morning. Names continue to be read aloud, and more accusations find their way onto the record. But beneath that carefully polished surface, beneath the priest's steady voice and the clerk's ink-stained hands, a quieter process unfolds. A slower kind of execution, political betrayal. It is visible if you know how to watch for it. Not in the grand statements, but in glances exchanged between nobles seated along the highest benches. In the way some knights, once bound and silent, now walk more freely within the palace walls. You notice how certain names have stopped appearing in the daily scrolls. Men once accused with as much fury as their brothers now seem forgotten, their confessions already buried in private archives. It is betrayal, but not only of the knights themselves. It is betrayal among the king's men, among the scribes and priests who shuffle between chambers carrying sealed scrolls. In one quiet corridor, you pass a pair of servants, too finely dressed to be mere messengers, not quite noble enough to stand openly in the great hall. One glances over his shoulder before slipping a folded parchment into the other's hand. No word spoken, no seal on the page. You understand these signals well enough. In every village, in every town square, there are the rules of public law, and then there are the hidden rules, the ones shaped by coin and whispered threat. Paris, for all its gilded rooftops and royal banners, is no different, only larger, only more carefully practiced. Later that evening, as the sky darkens to a cold silver behind layers of mist, you are summoned again, not to the trial hall this time, but to a side chamber deep within the palace. Smaller than the others, but finely built, its walls hung with dark tapestries to muffle sound. A single candle burns on the table at its center, its flame barely stirring in the cold air. The mayor of Paris sits there, alongside 2 royal advisors, their faces set in careful neutrality. One gestures for you to stand near the doorway, rather than approach the table directly. They speak in quiet voices, as if reciting a prayer, rather than issuing commands. You are told plainly, certain confessions gathered during the trial are to be set aside. Certain names are not to appear in the final verdicts. The reasons are not given, but you do not need to ask. Land holdings, favors owed, promises whispered in the dark. These things weigh heavier than parchment. One of the advisors hands you a folded slip of paper. On it, written in tight, precise script, are 6 names. Men already accused. Men you have seen standing in the hall among the others. The instructions are clear. Should the time come for public execution, these names are not to be called. Their sentences will be handled elsewhere, quietly, invisibly, perhaps exile, perhaps imprisonment in some far monastery, or perhaps something even quieter than that. You take the paper without a word, fold it, tuck it beneath your cloak. This is not a choice. It is part of the same machinery that has always turned beneath your boots. Historians sometimes write as though justice in these times was blind, as though verdicts followed the weight of evidence and the clarity of truth. You have seen enough now to know otherwise. Justice sees very well. It sees coin. It sees power. It sees risk. When you leave the side chamber, the halls feel colder, as though the shadows themselves have thickened. You pass a priest standing in a high archway, rosary in hand, eyes half closed in thought. Whether he knows what has just been arranged is impossible to say. But you suspect he does. There are few true secrets in a palace like this, only degrees of silence. You return to your quarters late that night, lighting no candle, moving in darkness as easily as others move by lamplight. The folded slip of paper remains tucked inside your cloak. You do not burn it. You do not hide it beneath the floorboards with your coin. You keep it close. Because even for you, who has spent a lifetime standing beside blocks and ropes, hearing verdicts spoken and carried out, this list feels heavier. It is not simply about who will live and who will die. It is about who will be remembered, whose story will pass into official record, and whose name will vanish entirely. The next morning, the great hall fills again. Faces look more tired now. The air is colder. Even the nobles wrapped in thick fur robes glance more often at the high windows, as if longing for the trials to end. But they continue. A slow grind. A necessary weight that must be carried until the process is deemed complete. The Grand Master of the Templars stands as steadily as ever, though you can see the change in his face. Lines deeper around his mouth, shoulders heavier with the weight of days spent waiting. Yet he does not speak. He does not flinch. During a lull in the proceedings, as the scribes sharpen their quills and the guards shift their feet in the cold, a clerk passes by your shoulder. He does not look at you directly, but as he moves, a single coin falls from his sleeve, a heavy silver piece stamped with a symbol not of France, but of a neighboring kingdom. You say nothing. You do not pick up the coin. It remains on the stone floor until a servant, eyes downcast, collects it quietly and slips it into his own pocket. Betrayal in the shadows, always quieter than the trials themselves, always heavier than the sentence written on paper. You remain at your post until the final name is called that day, until the candles burn low and the hall empties once more. And as you walk back to your room through corridors lined with silent tapestries, you know that what happens next will not be decided in any public hall. It will be decided in rooms like the one you visited the night before, over lists written in ink darker than any blood, over agreements sealed not with wax, but with silence. The trial continues. But history, as you have now seen with your own eyes, is not written only by the victor. It is written by those who know when to keep a secret. By the 7th week, the trial no longer draws the same crowds. The faces in the great hall have thinned. Nobles who once leaned forward eagerly now send proxies in their place. Scribes continue their work, quills scratching steadily, but the energy in the room has faded. What began as a spectacle has slowed to a formality. The outcome is known. The necessary records have been gathered. The machinery has done its work. You stand in your usual place against the far wall, arms folded beneath your cloak, sword at your hip. The accused stand in their line as always, though now there are fewer of them. Those named on your secret list have already been removed from the hall, quietly, without ceremony. Their absence is not mentioned aloud. No clerk calls their names. No scribe records their departure. For the others, the days stretch into a kind of dull inevitability. Jacques de Maillet remains among them, his face gaunt now, beard grown longer, eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. Yet even now, he does not break. Each morning, when he is led into the hall, he stands as straight as before. No plea, no final confession, just silence. Historians debate whether this final phase of the Templar trial was deliberate, a planned, gradual erasure, or whether it simply drifted into quiet through exhaustion. You believe it was both. By now, the purpose is not punishment. It is absorption. The Templar properties have already been claimed, their treasuries seized, their commanderies turned over to royal agents and church officials. The knights themselves are no longer enemies. They are relics, embarrassing reminders of a power the crown has decided must no longer exist. And so the trial draws to its close in silence. On the final day, there is no grand verdict spoken aloud. No bell tolls to mark its passing. The clerk simply stands before the assembled audience, smaller now, quieter, and reads a prepared statement. The Templar order is dissolved, its leaders condemned to life imprisonment, or, where necessary, execution. The charges are confirmed, the scrolls sealed. There is no applause, no shouting, only the shuffle of boots against stone as those in attendance turn to leave. The Grand Master stands perfectly still as the words are spoken, his eyes fixed not on the clerk, but on some point far beyond the hall's tall windows. Perhaps imagining the sky above Jerusalem, perhaps simply listening to the echo of the words as they bounce against the high ceiling. You watch him closely in that moment, noting the small details others might miss, the way his hands do not shake, the way his breath remains steady, even now. A man carrying not defeat, but final certainty. When the hall empties, the accused are led away for the last time. This time, there is no parade, no public procession, just guards moving in silent pairs, boots echoing through the long stone corridors. You follow as well, not because it is required, but because there is no other place to be. Your role in all of this has never been about presence in the public eye. It has been about remaining steady until the very end. You are led with the others into a quieter wing of the palace, where the final judgments are to be carried out. Some will go to prison cells beneath church strongholds. Others will disappear into remote monasteries, their names stricken from any surviving list. And some, though not many, will face the block or the stake. You wait as the last scroll is signed, standing in a narrow chamber lined with books and ledgers. The scribe who finishes the final record does not look up from his work. His quill scratches the parchment, steady and slow, one line after another. A lifetime's worth of names condensed into single sentences. It is strange, watching history close in real time. The Order of the Knights Templar, which once held fortresses across half of Europe and commanded armies larger than some kingdoms, reduced now to a handful of quiet entries in a royal ledger. No banners, no trumpets, only ink and silence. When the final line is signed, the scribe blows gently on the page to dry the ink, then folds the scroll carefully and seals it with wax. The wax bears the king's crest, a lily pressed deep into red, and the scroll is carried away, locked inside an iron-bound chest. That chest, you know, will travel to the royal archives. It will be kept for centuries, consulted by future kings and priests. But the men whose names it records will already be gone. You remain standing in the chamber after the others have left, listening to the faint echo of your own breath in the cold air. There is no one to speak to, no one to witness the moment. Just you and the quiet weight of it. Later, as evening settles over Paris, you walk the palace grounds alone. The gardens, though carefully tended, feel colder now. Statues stand like pale sentinels among trimmed hedges. The sky overhead is heavy with low clouds, pressing down as if to seal the city beneath a final layer of silence. By the time you return to your room, it is fully dark. You sit by the window, as you have so many nights before, watching the torches flicker along the palace walls. You think about the names that will never appear in any record, the men quietly spared, the deals struck behind tapestries and in shadowed alcoves. Justice, as always, is not about truth. It is about control. And control, as you have learned through years of steady work, is best maintained through silence. The trial is over. The Templars have fallen. And yet, as you watch Paris sleep beneath its heavy sky, you know the weight of unfinished stories still lingers in the stones. But our path does not end in the halls of royal power. As the quiet settles fully over the order, our journey takes us across the English Channel to another fortress of stone and silence, the Tower of London. There, beneath its blackened walls and cold iron gates, men vanished without trial, names that were never written, stories that ended not with scrolls and confessions, but with locked doors and shadows that never spoke again. Now, as the palace fades behind us, let us step through those gates and into the tower's long, silent halls. You arrive at the Tower of London long before dawn, when the sky is still a pale, bruised gray, and the city around it lies wrapped in a kind of damp silence. The boat that carries you up the Thames glides through dark, steady water, its oars dipping with slow precision. There is no wind, only the quiet slap of wood against river. Even the city's usual noise, vendors, carts, the rustle of fabric, feels far away from this part of the banks. London itself seems to hold its breath as you draw near the fortress. From a distance, the tower does not look as large as its reputation suggests. Its walls rise heavy and pale from the river's edge, stained darker near the base where the tide has left its permanent mark. The turrets and battlements seem almost sleepy beneath the cloud-heavy sky. But as you draw closer, and the boat's prow bumps gently against the landing stones, the true weight of the place settles into your bones. It is not merely a building, it is a presence. You step onto the dock known as Trader's Gate. The name is older than most of the city's streets, whispered by generations of men and women brought here under the cover of darkness. The gate itself is a tall, pointed arch of thick wood and iron, blackened with age, its beams scarred by countless hands that once clung to it in their final moments of freedom. You glance up as you pass beneath it. The stones overhead drip cold water, echoing like a clock counting down, one droplet at a time. Inside the gate, the walls rise on either side, close enough to make the air feel heavier. Guards wait in silence, faces mostly hidden beneath dark hoods. No formal greetings are offered. You show the writ from the crown, folded parchment sealed with wax, and the guard captain nods once. A thick iron key is drawn from a chain at his belt, and the first of many doors is unlocked with a slow, deliberate scrape. The tower is not just a prison. That is what sets it apart from the rough stone jails of smaller towns. It is a fortress, a royal residence, a treasury, and a cage for the inconvenient, all at once. You walk beneath its inner arches, boots striking stone worn hollow in the center from centuries of pacing feet. Above, narrow windows let in thin ribbons of pale light, not enough to fully dispel the shadows lingering in the corners. Historians debate how many prisoners were held within the tower at any given time. Some records mention hundreds, others only a handful. What is clear as you move deeper into its halls is that the true weight of the tower is not in its size, but in its silence. You are led through one courtyard, past the chapel where former queens were once married or mourned. The bells there do not ring today. Beyond the courtyard lies the inner ward, hemmed in by taller walls, more keys, more locked gates. It is here that the most important prisoners are kept, not common thieves or drunken brawlers, but noblemen accused of treason, bishops fallen from favor, even members of the royal family when politics have shifted against them. The air smells of damp stone, old iron, and something harder to define, a kind of quiet history ground into the very walls. Your guide says little as you move, but you can feel his presence close behind you. The guards here are not like village watchmen. They move slowly, deliberately, carrying not just weapons, but the weight of generations of duty. You pause as you pass beneath one of the tower's oldest arches, looking up at carvings barely visible now, faded coats of arms, initials scratched into the stone by prisoners long forgotten. Some have been carefully chiseled away by later hands. Others remain as faint echoes, names no longer spoken aloud, but impossible to fully erase. Your steps take you finally to the heart of the tower's prison complex, the Bloody Tower. Its name is spoken with quiet certainty by those who know its history. The stones here are darker, streaked not with blood, but with the marks of old water damage, mold, and time's steady hand. Inside, the cells are not simple rooms. They are chambers layered with doors. Wooden first, then iron, then stone. Each layer adds another weight of silence. It is here that you are to begin your own work, not as executioner today, but as observer. Records must be kept, confessions gathered, names marked down in the ledgers, carried carefully beneath your arm. You are shown a small room for your use, a clerk's cell near the entrance to the prison wing, equipped with a desk, a single chair, and a narrow window so high on the wall that you can see only a sliver of sky. The desk bears deep scratches, as though countless others before you have sat here, recording names that have long since faded from official history. You set down your ledger and unroll a fresh sheet of parchment, adjusting the ink pot so it catches just enough of the light filtering through the window. The quill rests in your hand with a familiar weight. You have written thousands of names in your life, some carved into stone, others inked onto scrolls. Here, the difference feels sharper. Each name you record is one step closer to disappearance. The first prisoner you meet is brought to you by 2 guards, his wrists bound in iron cuffs. His name is spoken quietly, Lord Robert of Wessex, accused of conspiracy against the crown. He looks pale, clothes once fine now reduced to stained linen. His eyes flicker briefly to your sword, before settling on the parchment before you. You ask his name, as procedure demands. His voice is rough but steady as he speaks. You write it down in careful script, letting the ink dry before adding the charge beside it. There is no trial here, no formal hearing. Once a prisoner enters this part of the tower, the sentence is already understood. Sometimes it ends with execution, sometimes with quiet disappearance. You continue the process all morning, name after name. Some prisoners speak clearly. Others mutter half-formed phrases, too broken by isolation or fear to offer more than a whisper. Each name joins the growing list. Each line another layer of silence added to the tower's walls. By late afternoon, the light through your narrow window has shifted to gold. You pause, setting down your quill, flexing your fingers stiff from hours of writing. Outside your cell, the guards continue their slow patrol, boots echoing on stone. No one speaks unless absolutely required. Even among the men who serve here, silence is part of the uniform. You step out into the courtyard briefly, standing beneath one of the tower's outer walls. The sky has cleared slightly, revealing a sharp blue line just above the highest turrets. Birds wheel overhead, but they make no sound. It is as though even the wind knows better than to raise its voice within these walls. Historians often write that the tower's greatest power was its reputation, that it was not simply a prison, but a symbol of royal authority that stretched far beyond London's gates. You know now that this is true. Standing here, feeling the cold press of stone against your back, you understand that the tower's weight is not in its walls alone. It is in the silence left behind by those who entered and never walked back out. As evening deepens and the sky turns from gold to gray once more, you return to your clerk's cell, lighting a single candle against the growing dark. The ledger waits, open and patient, ink drying in slow pools. You pick up your quill again, ready to continue. Outside, the guards lock the gates for the night, their keys turning slowly in iron locks as thick as your wrist. The tower stands quiet, and within its walls, stories begin to disappear. But our path does not end here. Beyond these stone walls and shadowed cells, deeper mysteries linger still. Secrets sealed behind heavier doors. Names that were never written in any ledger, but that vanish all the same. And so, As night settles fully over the Tower of London, our steps continue forward, into the hidden corners where history keeps its quietest truths. Morning in the Tower of London arrives slowly, not with the cheerful peal of church bells or the rustle of market stalls, but with a colder, quieter rhythm. The creak of iron hinges as guards begin their rounds, the scrape of boots against stone, and the steady drip of water from unseen places high above. You wake before the sky has fully brightened, not because of habit alone, but because the tower does not allow for deep, restful sleep. The walls are too thick, the air too still. You dress as you did the day before. Simple tunic, heavier cloak against the morning chill, sword buckled at your side. And again, as before, you take up your ledger and quill, prepared to record whatever names and movements pass through the prison halls. Yet as the hours stretch ahead of you, it becomes clear that life inside these stone walls is not marked by constant motion. Much of it is waiting, endless, slow waiting. The prisoners within the tower live in a rhythm of silence and routine. There are no public floggings here, no shouting from cell to cell. Only the quiet scrape of a wooden bowl passed through an iron-barred hatch, or the muffled cough of someone too long kept in cold air. The cells themselves vary by status. Some are no more than small stone chambers with straw scattered on the floor. A single narrow window set so high in the wall it offers no view. Others, granted to those of higher rank, are larger, rooms fitted with simple beds and rough tables, small fireplaces that never quite chase away the damp. Yet no matter the rank or the size of the cell, the experience remains the same: isolation. Time slows to a crawl behind the tower's walls. Hours stretch into days, days into weeks. The outside world becomes little more than a memory. You walk the halls in silence, boots echoing against stone, occasionally pausing to check the prisoner lists. Each name carefully recorded, each movement noted. When food was delivered, when a priest visited, when orders came down from the higher courts. Some prisoners remain locked in total darkness. Others are granted narrow glimpses of sky, though what comfort that provides is debatable. The tower's windows do not open. The air is always heavy with stone dust and the faint sharpness of iron. You visit the cells as required, not to speak, but to observe. It is part of your task here, to note not only who is present, but how they endure. Some prisoners sit in silence for hours, hands folded, heads bowed as if in endless prayer. Others pace, the same few steps repeated over and over until the stone beneath their feet wears smooth. You have seen it before in other places. Men who cannot sit still for long, trapped by thoughts louder than the silence around them. Once, mid-morning, you pause outside a cell where a nobleman accused of treason sits facing the wall. His name has already been entered into the ledger. His sentence not yet passed, but understood. You do not knock. You do not announce yourself. You simply observe. His shoulders move with slow, deliberate breaths. He does not turn to face you. Whether he knows you are, there is unclear. But it hardly matters. In the tower, most men learn not to expect company. The guards carry out their routines with the same quiet efficiency. Food is delivered twice daily. Small portions of bread, hard cheese, thin soup served lukewarm in iron bowls. No one speaks as they pass the trays through. Questions are discouraged. Conversations unnecessary. Historians often describe the tower as a place of terror. And it is, in its way. But the greater weight here is not active fear. It is the weight of nothing happening. Days stretching forward with no clear end. The slow erosion of thought and memory beneath layers of silence. There is no clock here. No bell marking the hours, except for the occasional chime from St. Peter ad Vincula Chapel beyond the inner courtyard. But even that sound feels distant, trapped behind too many layers of stone. You mark the passing of time by your ledger alone, each name added, each note recorded, each page filled with careful script. Occasionally, you are called to witness special events. A prisoner moved from one cell to another, a final confession taken before a sentence is carried out. But such moments are rare. Most days, life behind the tower's walls is quiet repetition. In the afternoons, you walk the perimeter of the inner ward. The outer walls rise above you, heavy and dark, their surfaces pitted and scarred by centuries of weather. Ravens gather here, black shapes perched along the battlements, their wings silent as they move. It is said that if the ravens ever leave the tower, the kingdom itself will fall. You do not believe in such things, yet you watch them all the same. Once, as you pass beneath one of the oldest arches, you pause to examine the carved graffiti left by prisoners long forgotten. Letters scratched deep into the stone, symbols, dates, a name half finished, as if the man writing it had been interrupted before he could complete it. You run your fingers over the marks, feeling the grooves worn smooth by time. These are the true records here, not the scrolls kept in royal archives, but the silent marks left behind by those who endured. Not just kings and nobles, but servants, soldiers, common men, caught in the wrong whisper or wrong moment. As evening settles in, the guards lock the gates once more. The sound of iron bars sliding into place echoes through the stone halls like the toll of a bell. You return to your clerk's cell, lighting a single candle against the growing dark. The tower's silence deepens at night. It is not the peaceful quiet of sleep, but something heavier, a pause that feels almost alive. You sit at your desk, adding the final notes to your ledger for the day. Names written carefully, movements recorded. Yet even as you write, you know that many of these names will never be spoken again. They will vanish into the tower's walls, as surely as water seeps into stone. The flame flickers low in the candle. Beyond your window, the sky is black now, no stars visible through the narrow slit. You close the ledger, setting down your quill with deliberate care. And as you lean back in your chair, hands folded quietly in your lap, you listen, not for footsteps, not for voices, but for the deeper silence that holds the tower together. That silence is not emptiness, it is memory. And while the tower's prisoners may fade from the world beyond, their presence lingers here, carved into walls, scratched into wooden doors, layered into the very air you breathe. But our journey does not end within these quiet walls. Beyond the tower's gates, in the royal courts and private chambers, decisions continue to be made. And so, we follow the path further, stepping now into the life of a man who stands between judgment and mercy. A royal judge, whose choices balance power, wealth, and quiet whispers behind velvet curtains. Not every prisoner in the Tower of London leaves a name behind. Some do not appear in your ledgers at all. Their names are never spoken aloud in the Great Hall, nor are they marked in official scrolls sealed with royal wax. Yet as you walk the deeper corridors of the tower, long after the sun has set and the guards' boots no longer echo so loudly, you begin to notice signs of them. There are cells even the guards avoid unless ordered. Low, narrow chambers tucked into corners beneath stairwells, or behind heavy wooden doors that no longer bear crests or identifying plaques. These are not the grand cells given to nobles awaiting trial. They are older, darker, and often damp with a persistent cold that no brazier can truly chase away. It begins with a misplaced entry in your ledger. One morning, as you check the lists against the actual prisoners, you notice a missing line. A name you remember writing days earlier no longer appears in the pages carried by the royal clerk. Lord Edric of Suffolk, charged with conspiracy, last seen 3 nights ago. When you ask the nearest guard, he shrugs in a way that is practiced, deliberate, avoiding your eye. Moved, he says simply. Orders from higher up, but no record exists. No cell marked for transfer. You check twice, walking the halls from one end of the prison complex to the other. The name has been erased, not only from paper, but from conversation. The guards do not speak of him. The scribes look through you when you ask. It is not just silence now. It is intentional forgetting. Historians sometimes speak of ghost prisoners, men and women held in the tower outside the formal records. Rumors, they say unverified accounts. But as you stand beneath the oldest archways, feeling the damp stone beneath your hand, you know better. These ghost cells are real. You find the first one late at night. A narrow wooden door set flush with the stone wall, its surface unmarked. There is no keyhole, no iron ring for pulling. Only a faint seam visible where wood meets stone. By chance, or by quiet design, you see a guard pass by and press his palm against the stone beside the door. A quiet signal. The door opens inward on silent hinges. Inside, the air is colder still. The cell is smaller than any other you have seen in the tower, no wider than your outstretched arms, no taller than a man's height. The walls are smooth stone, too perfect, as though cut and finished in secrecy. No window, no straw on the floor, only a single iron ring fixed into the wall for shackles. And in the center, sitting in silence, a man. His clothes are plain, not noble. His face is pale beneath the thin sliver of light from the open door. He does not look up as you step inside. His hands rest quietly in his lap, shackled but still. No name is spoken. You do not ask. The guard closes the door behind you, leaving you and the man in a silence as deep as the river's bottom. You stand there for several minutes, studying the room. The walls bear no scratches, no markings. Not a single letter carved in desperation. It is as if even memory is forbidden here. When you step out again, the guard locks the door. You say nothing. He says nothing. But the shape of it settles into your mind like a stone dropped into a still pond. There are other cells like this. You can feel it in the layout of the tower itself. Doors you never noticed, corners that seem deeper than they should be, stairwells that descend farther than the official maps suggest. Over the next days, you begin to map them quietly in your own ledger, not as official entries, not as part of the trial records. Just small marks in the margins, circles and lines, noting which walls seem to hide something behind them. You see more signs as you walk. Once, in the early morning, you hear a voice behind one of those unmarked doors. A low murmur, words too faint to catch fully. When you glance at the nearest guard, he shakes his head once, sharp, final. You do not press the question. The tower holds many layers of silence. The silence of waiting prisoners. The silence of finished trials. And beneath both, the silence of the forgotten. One evening, after your official duties are finished, you climb the White Tower's inner stairwell, higher than the prison chambers, past storerooms, and forgotten armories. From here, through a narrow arrow-slit window, you can see most of the city stretching beyond the walls. Rooftops packed tight against each other, smoke rising in thin gray lines from 1,000 hearths. The Thames glimmering faintly beneath a sky heavy with unlit stars. From up here, the tower's outer walls seem impenetrable. But you know now that it is not just stone that holds prisoners in place. It is secrecy. Not all chains are iron. Some are made of silence. Historians may write of the tower's grandest prisoners, queens, dukes, grand masters of orders long dissolved. Their names survive in scrolls and stained glass windows. But the ghost cells leave no such trace. Their occupants vanish into stone and shadow, remembered only by those who walk the halls with quiet eyes. You close your ledger for the evening with deliberate care, brushing the edge of your sleeve across the parchment to smooth the last line of ink. No names are written in today's official record, but in your private notes, a map of ghost cells grows steadily clearer. As the candle burns low beside you, the tower settles into its deepest quiet. Only the occasional crack of timber in the cold, the rustle of a raven's wings against stone. And as always, you sit alone with the silence, not of peace, but of things carefully left unspoken. But our path does not end with shadows hidden behind stone walls. Beyond the tower, beyond the silent prisoners, there are those who stand in judgment over all. Men whose decisions shape the fates of both noble and common alike. And so, as we close the heavy doors of the tower behind us, we step now into another world. The life of a royal judge, where mercy and law collide beneath velvet robes and golden crests. There are certain mornings when the rhythm of the tower changes, not in sound, but in the air itself. You wake before the sun fully rises, as usual, but instead of the quiet shuffle of guards and the muted clatter of food being delivered to cells, there is a sharper edge. Boots strike the stone with greater urgency. Doors creak open farther than necessary. Orders are whispered in hallways, usually left undisturbed until midday. This is how you know, without being told, that someone important is arriving. A royal visitor. It is not unheard of. The tower serves many roles: fortress, prison, treasury, symbol. And occasionally, it becomes a stage for power itself. A king does not visit such places without cause. You feel the shift as soon as you step from your small cell into the main hall. The guards stand straighter. Their uniforms, usually slightly rumpled from long night watches, are now crisp. Torches have been replaced. Brass fixtures shine where they were dull the day before. You are handed no special instruction, but the message is clear. You are to stand ready, ledger in hand, sword at your hip, bearing witness. That has always been your quiet task. You walk with steady steps through the inner ward until you reach the base of the White Tower itself. Already, a line of soldiers in polished mail stands along the path, their helms glinting in the morning light. Historians often argue about the importance of these royal visits. Were they mere shows of force? Quiet inspections? Or something subtler? A chance for kings to remind both prisoners and keepers alike that all power flows from their hand? From your place beneath the tower's archways, you can answer. It is all of these things. The first sign is the sound of hooves. Horses approaching through the outer gate. You cannot see them from where you stand, but the echo carries easily. Then the voice of a herald, sharp and formal, calling out titles that stretch longer than any common man's name. His Majesty King Edward II, by the grace of God, King of England, Lord of Ireland, and Sovereign of the Duchy of Aquitaine. The main gates open fully for the first time in weeks. Guards step aside, and through them rides the king, not in armor, but in a heavy cloak of deep blue trimmed with fur, the crown visible atop his brow, even in this gray morning light. He does not ride a grand warhorse, nor does he carry a sword openly. This visit is not about war. It is about quiet control. Behind him come two royal advisors, their faces hidden beneath hoods, and a handful of servants carrying scrolls and ledgers. One holds a simple silver box, its contents known only to those with the proper seal. The king's eyes pass over the gathered guards, then rest on you for a brief moment. You do not bow low, not here. That is not the role of men in your position. You incline your head slowly, deliberately, maintaining the same careful stillness you have practiced all your life. The king dismounts with quiet efficiency, his boots striking stone as if he has done this before many times, though no one speaks of it. Royal feet upon tower stones, a signal as loud as any bell. He moves with deliberate steps toward the entrance to the inner prison, flanked by his advisors. No grand speeches, no declarations, only quiet purpose. You follow a few paces behind, ledger in hand, recording the time and nature of the visit as part of your duties. Inside the tower's inner chambers, the king pauses before one particular door, a larger cell meant not for common criminals, but for noble prisoners of special importance. The guards unlock it with practiced care. Iron hinges groan as the door swings open, revealing the familiar figure of Lord Etheric of Northumberland, a man held not for treason alone, but for debts owed to the crown too large to repay. The king says little, a few words exchanged in low tones, too quiet for others to hear fully. What matters is not the content of those words, but the fact that they are spoken at all. A king's presence in a prisoner's cell is as much about memory as it is about mercy or judgment. You stand back, noting the exchange in your ledger with slow, deliberate strokes of the quill. Royal visitation. His Majesty to Lord Aetheric. Private discourse. Nothing more, nothing less. That is the way it is done. When the conversation ends, the king steps back into the hall. There is no dramatic gesture, no sudden declaration of pardon or execution. Only a nod to his advisors, who record their own notes on slim parchment rolls. The door is locked again. The prisoner left alone with whatever words were shared. The royal party does not linger long. Through the halls they move again, inspecting without speaking, as though measuring the tower's weight not in stone and iron, but in silence and stillness. You follow at a respectful distance, observing as more names are quietly checked against hidden scrolls. Prisoners whose names do not appear on official ledgers. Prisoners who will never be spoken of in court. Before leaving, the king pauses once more in the outer ward, glancing up at the tower's highest point. For a brief moment, his face is lit by the pale morning sun breaking through the clouds. And then, with the same quiet purpose as before, he remounts his horse. The gates open. The herald's voice echoes once again. And just as suddenly as it began, the royal visit ends. You remain standing until the last hoofbeat fades beyond the walls. Then quietly, you return to your clerk's cell, setting down your ledger with careful hands. Historians may write of such visits as mere ceremony, but you know better. You have seen the way a single royal step within these walls can change everything. Quiet decisions made, names removed or added to lists. Fates altered not by public trial, but by a quiet word behind locked doors. The tower returns to its usual rhythm within hours. Guards resume their slower, steadier pace. Food is brought to the cells. Quills scratch against parchment once more. But within your ledger, marked in a line as simple as any other, the king's visit remains recorded. Proof that even in a place built on silence, the heaviest footsteps of all belong to the crown. And so, as night falls once more over the tower's stone walls, our path leads onward to the life of the man whose decisions shape all these fates, the royal judge. In chambers beyond the prison, where velvet curtains muffle whispered arguments, mercy and law collide in decisions that ripple through every hall, every cell, every ledger you have ever written. By now, the tower has settled into a rhythm so quiet, it feels as though time itself has slowed. The great trials have ended. The scrolls have been sealed and sent. The names have been carved into stone or quietly erased. Yet as you continue your daily walks through the prison halls, you notice something peculiar. One by one, prisoners begin to vanish, not as part of formal release, not carried through the outer gates with the king's blessing, but quietly, without announcement or record. It begins with a missing bowl. You check your ledger one morning as you walk past the lower cells. Lord Aetheric of Northumberland's name is still written in neat script, along with the time of his last meal. But when you pause outside his cell, there is no answer when you call. No movement, no sound. You unlock the door yourself, a rare act, and step inside. The room is empty. The bed remains neatly made, the wooden bench undisturbed, the iron shackles still hanging from the wall. Yet there is no sign of the prisoner, no struggle, no blood, no note left behind, only silence. You report the absence to the captain of the guards. He listens, his face unmoved, then simply nods. Orders, he says, from above. That is all. No search is organized, no inquiry made. The door is locked again as if nothing has changed. And in your ledger, you are instructed to strike the name through with a single line. No annotation. No reason given. The pattern continues. Over the next weeks, more cells are found empty. At first, it seems random. A knight here, a merchant there. But as you look closer, you realize it is not random at all. The disappearances follow a quiet list, a second ledger kept not by you, but by men higher in rank. Those men who whispered to the king during his visit. Those who carried the silver box you never saw opened. Historians would later debate whether these final disappearances were executions carried out in secret or quiet pardons granted to protect reputations. You stand in the halls where it happens, and the truth is clear. Neither. It is something colder, a deliberate erasure. Names removed from history as completely as they are removed from the cells. You begin marking them in your private ledger, not the official one, but the small book you keep hidden beneath the floorboards of your clerk's room. Each name, each date, a quiet record of what has truly passed. It feels necessary, even though you know no one will ever read it but you. One evening, you witness it directly. Late, when the tower is quieter still, you hear footsteps outside your door. Not the usual guards, but softer, deliberate steps. You open the door just in time to see two men in dark cloaks moving through the corridor, flanked by guards carrying no torches. They stop outside one of the deeper cells. You watch from the shadows as the door is unlocked. The prisoner inside, a man you recorded weeks ago as awaiting formal sentence, steps out quietly, without resistance. His hands are bound, but his face shows no fear. He has been waiting for this. No words are spoken. The group moves down the corridor and vanishes into a side passage you have never seen used before. A door hidden behind a hanging tapestry. When you try to follow, a guard steps in your way, shaking his head slowly, silently. You do not argue. You simply return to your desk, your hand shaking slightly as you write the man's name into your private book, followed by two words: final disappearance. It is not execution. You would have heard the blade. It is not release. The outer gates never open. It is something in between, a quiet vanishing designed to erase not just the man, but his story, his memory, his weight in the world. By the end of the month, more than half the cells stand empty. Yet officially, the ledgers say nothing. No proclamations are issued. No bells are rung. The tower's outward face remains unchanged. One morning, you visit the White Tower's upper chamber and speak quietly with the royal scribe. You ask, with the careful courtesy of your rank, where the records of these prisoners will be stored. He does not look up from his parchment. There are no records, he says. They do not exist. You leave without another word. There is nothing else to say. That evening, as the last of the sun fades behind the tower's battlements, you sit at your desk and open your private ledger once more. You write the final line across its last page. All names struck. Silence complete. And as the candle burns lower, flickering in the cold draft that always slips through the tower's stones, you realize there is no greater sentence than to be forgotten. But our journey does not end with the tower's silent stones. Beyond these walls, in grand chambers lined with velvet curtains and gilded crests, another kind of judgment waits. In the halls of royal justice, a judge sits beneath banners of gold and red, balancing not just names, but the weight of mercy, power, and hidden truth. Now, as the tower's iron gates close behind us, we step into the life of that judge, and the secret burdens carried behind every verdict. By the time the final winter of your service arrives, the tower feels emptier than it ever has before. There are still guards walking their patrols, their boots clinking quietly against frost-covered stones. The ravens still gather along the battlements, black wings folded tight against the wind. But the weight of the place has shifted. The once crowded prison cells now stand mostly silent and unused. The great trial scrolls have long since been carried off to royal archives. Even the ghost cells, hidden behind secret doors and deeper passages, no longer hold their quiet prisoners. You wake each morning now, not to the scrape of quills and the shuffle of new prisoners, but to a softer quiet. A stillness broken only by the creak of wood as frost settles into the beams overhead. The fire in your clerk's cell burns low, more often for comfort than necessity. Your official duties have slowed. There are fewer names to record, fewer movements to track, yet still you walk the halls each day, boots echoing against walls that now remember more than they hold. The guards nod as you pass. Some are younger now, fresh-faced men who are not here during the great trials. They speak less of what the tower was and more of what it might become. A place for coin storage, perhaps, or royal meetings rather than prison cells. But you remember the weight of those names. You remember the final disappearances. The ledger you keep hidden beneath your floorboards holds more truth than the official records ever will. You pause often beneath the arches, fingers trailing along the cold stone. Here, beneath a carved initial half-faded. There, beside the iron rings still bolted into the walls, rusted through but never removed. These are the true remnants of the tower's past. Not the grand gates or the polished floors of the royal chambers above, but these quiet, almost invisible scars left behind by those who passed through without farewell. One afternoon, as you walk beneath the bloody tower's archway, snow begins to fall. The flakes drift in through narrow windows, settling against stone already chilled by the season. It is the kind of snow that falls without wind, steady, patient, as inevitable as the turning of the tower's iron keys. Historians often ask, looking back, when the tower's days as a prison truly ended. Some write that it was gradual. Others claim a single date. But standing here now, you know the truth. It does not end all at once. It simply quiets, stone by stone, name by name, until only the walls remain, holding all the silence within them. Even now, as the sun lowers beyond the city's rooftops, casting the Thames in shades of silver and ash, you remain at your post. Ledger beneath your arm, sword still at your hip, not as a tool of execution, but as a symbol. A reminder that judgment, once carried out, does not disappear. It lingers. In stone, in names, in silence. That evening, for the first time in years, you light no candle in your cell. You leave the ledger closed. The guards lock the gates with their usual quiet precision. And as the last bell tolls from St. Peter at Vincula, echoing against the frost-slick walls, you sit by your window and simply watch. The tower stands quiet, heavy with memory, empty of names, waiting not for the next prisoner, but for history itself to catch up. And now, as we leave the tower behind, its stones growing colder with each passing year, our path turns once more. Beyond these ancient walls, beyond the prisoners and guards, another figure waits. A man seated not in a cell, but upon a wooden bench draped with rich fabric. A royal judge, tasked with weighing not just guilt and innocence, but the quiet currents of power that flow behind both. Our journey continues there, stepping now into the life of the judge who stands between law and mercy, verdict and silence, in a world shaped by whispers as much as by stone. Morning in the royal court does not begin with steel against stone or boots echoing through prison corridors. It begins with paper, stacks upon stacks of parchment tied in neat bundles, resting on long wooden tables polished so smooth they reflect candlelight like pools of water. You find yourself here now, no longer in the tower's gray silence, but in the royal justice chambers themselves, a vaulted hall lined with banners in deep reds and golds, the crest of the king embroidered on every hanging. The walls are lined not with guards, but with clerks and scribes, each hunched over ledgers. Quills scratch rhythmically, a sound as constant as river water. At the far end of the chamber stands a raised dais, upon which sits the judge, the king's appointed hand, robed in dark velvet lined with fur. a collar stiff with embroidered gold thread. He does not carry a sword. His tools are paper and seal, ink and silence. And yet, in this room, his word weighs heavier than any executioner's blade. You observe from the side as the morning docket is laid out before him. A clerk carries each bundle of parchment forward with careful precision, placing them one by one on a long bench in front of the judge. There are no grand speeches, no crowds of commoners gathered to watch. This is not the outer court, where public disputes are settled in the square. This is the inner circle of royal judgment, where decisions are made that ripple through the kingdom's highest ranks. Each parchment contains a case, some as simple as land disputes between minor nobles, others far weightier, accusations of treason, debts owed to the crown, quiet recommendations from the tower scribes on which prisoners might be spared or erased entirely. Historians often write that royal judges were figures of cold impartiality, but standing here, close enough to hear the rustle of the judge's sleeves as he moves, you see the reality is more complicated. The man seated on the dais must weigh not only the facts presented in ink, but the unspoken balances of power. Which noble houses are rising? Which families have fallen out of favor? Which crimes must be punished for the sake of appearance, and which must be quietly set aside? You watch as the judge begins his work. His hands are steady, his eyes calm, betraying no surprise as each scroll is unrolled before him. A clerk reads each case aloud in a voice, carefully measured to carry through the hall without echoing too sharply. Lord Osric of Pembroke, charged with withholding taxes from the crown. Lady Marjorie of Kent, accused of harboring fugitives from royal justice. Sir Edward of Dunwich, named in testimony gathered from the Tower of London. Each name is followed by a pause, a moment for the judge to consider. Sometimes he speaks aloud, issuing a verdict immediately. Seize properties, imprison without trial, issue formal pardon. Other times, he simply nods once, and the clerk records the decision without further comment. It is a quiet rhythm, unchanging, scroll after scroll, name after name. The morning docket is not a grand event. It is a machine, steady, deliberate, inevitable. As you stand there, ledger in hand, you are instructed to record the outcomes as well. A secondary record, not for public knowledge, but for internal use. You write each name with careful precision, noting the judgment beside it in the margin. Seized, pardoned, erased. The judge does not acknowledge you directly, but you feel his awareness all the same. His gaze passes over the hall, measuring every figure present. His role requires not just legal knowledge, but constant calculation. There are no truly impartial judgments here. Every decision feeds into a larger balance of favor and power. Once mid-morning, a case arises that causes a quiet stir. The name spoken belongs to a man recently vanished from the tower, a noble whose final disappearance you yourself recorded in secret. Yet here, his name is spoken as though nothing unusual has happened. The clerk reads, Sir Alaric of Dover, accused of conspiracy against the crown, but no sentence is given. The judge simply folds his hands, eyes narrowing slightly, and instructs the clerk. Case closed, no further action. You feel the weight of that decision more heavily than any others. It is not a matter of guilt or innocence. It is a matter of erasure. Quiet control. The royal judge ensures that certain names fade entirely, not through fire or blade, but through silence and ink. The docket continues until midday, the stack of scrolls slowly shrinking as each case is read and recorded. By the time the last parchment is unrolled, the hall has grown warmer from so many bodies gathered in close quarters. Candles gutter low in their holders. The scribe's quills move more slowly now, hands cramped from hours of steady writing. Finally, the judge stands, a quiet signal that the session is complete. The clerks gather the remaining scrolls, tying them into fresh bundles to be carried to the royal archives. The hall begins to empty. footsteps echoing beneath the high ceiling as each figure returns to their appointed place. You remain a moment longer, watching as the judge steps down from the dais, his velvet robes trailing behind him. He does not speak to you directly, but as he passes, there is a brief glance, enough to remind you that even now, outside the tower, your presence carries weight. You leave the hall in silence, ledger tucked beneath your arm, stepping back into the colder air of the outer corridors. The court's inner workings continue beyond your sight, but you have seen enough to understand their rhythm. Justice here is not blind. It watches carefully. It listens in silence. And it writes its judgments not just in law, but in the quiet disappearance of names. As the afternoon stretches toward evening, your path leads onward to the judge's private chambers, where decisions are not made by scroll and seal alone, but by quiet conversation behind closed doors, where mercy and ambition are weighed in equal measure. After the morning docket concludes and the last scroll is sealed with wax, the royal judge does not retire to a grand hall or public gallery. Instead, he moves to quieter, private chambers, rooms reserved for matters too delicate or layered for public record. These spaces are not marked with banners or gilded doors. Rather, they sit tucked behind unassuming corridors, hidden behind plain wooden panels that reveal nothing of their importance from the outside. It is in one such chamber that you now find yourself summoned, not as a common clerk, but as an observer trusted to witness how justice truly unfolds when no audience is present. Inside, the room is dimly lit by two low-burning hearths. The scent of parchment and beeswax hangs in the air, mingling with the faint metallic tongue of ink freshly poured into ceramic pots. Shelves line every wall, stacked with ledgers and scrolls, none labeled in plain sight. Instead, each bears discreet markings, known only to the few men who work here. The judge sits at a broad oak desk, his heavy robes replaced with simpler wool garments, dark, without ornament, suited for quiet work rather than display. His posture is not that of a man performing for others, but of one engaged in long, deliberate thought. You enter and stand silently until he gestures for you to approach. Your own ledger rests beneath your arm, though here it feels small and incomplete compared to the volumes arrayed before him. Without looking up, the judge begins speaking in the same measured tone he uses in court. Yet now his words carry a different weight, one less concerned with ceremony and more with the quiet machinery that keeps the kingdom balanced. Justice, he says evenly, is not a single act. It is a series of layers, each decision resting atop the one before it. You listen without interruption as he unfolds a scroll on the desk before him. The parchment is not marked with crimes and sentences, as in the public court. Instead, it lists names paired with properties, alliances, debts, and favors owed. Some of these names belong to men who stood trial that morning. Others belong to men who were never named aloud at all. As he works, he marks the scroll with notations. Brief, precise phrases such as hold, proceed, or quiet dismissal. Each of these notes carries consequences as real as any spoken verdict. A name marked hold may spend another month in the tower, awaiting further decision. Proceed signals property seizure or imprisonment. Quiet dismissal erases a name entirely from public record. Historians often claim that medieval justice was harsh, rigid, a simple matter of crime and punishment. Yet standing here now, close enough to see the judge's careful handwriting as he moves through case after case, it becomes clear that reality is far more complicated. Justice at this level is a negotiation, a balance of power and favor, punishment and reward, layered as carefully as the folded parchment scrolls themselves. The judge sets aside one scroll and opens another. This one bears the royal seal, pressed deep into red wax, signifying its importance. You recognize several names listed within, men whose fates you recorded in your own private ledger while working in the tower. Yet here, alongside their names, are quiet annotations you never saw in any official document. Notes about family connections, landholdings, secret alliances. These details shape as much of the judge's decisions as the crimes themselves. Occasionally, he pauses his writing to speak, not for formality, but to test your understanding. A man's guilt, he remarks while tapping a name on the scroll, is only one measure of his place in the record. Sometimes, guilt is outweighed by usefulness. Other times, it is silenced for the sake of order. You nod once, offering no argument. You have seen it before in smaller forms. Village trials where mercy was granted not because a man deserved it, but because his punishment would have unsettled too many others. Here, the same principle is applied on a grander scale. Entire estates redistributed, houses removed from royal favor, alliances quietly rearranged behind the walls of this simple, book-filled chamber. The judge gestures toward a smaller scroll to one side. These names, he says, have been removed from public record. He unrolls the scroll slowly, revealing a list shorter than the others, each name followed by a single deliberate mark. These are not men awaiting trial. They are not even prisoners in the tower anymore. They have vanished deliberately, quietly. You understand without being told that this scroll represents the final layer of justice, the decisions that are never spoken aloud, never written into the royal archive. Write them, the judge instructs, in your private book only. You take out your own ledger, the smaller one hidden beneath your official volumes, and begin copying each name with the same slow, steady care you have practiced for years. No extra flourishes, no unnecessary notes, just names, dates, and the quiet knowledge that these lines carry a weight heavier than any formal sentence. The judge continues working as you write, moving from scroll to scroll, layering one decision atop another. Once, he pauses to pour wine. 2 cups, one placed in front of you without fanfare. It is not an invitation to relax. It is part of the ritual. To work within these chambers, to witness these layers of justice, is to become part of them yourself. By late afternoon, the pile of scrolls has grown smaller. Sealed bundles are stacked neatly at the desk's corner, ready to be carried away by trusted scribes. Others remain open, still under consideration. The judge does not rush. Each decision, no matter how small, is treated with the same deliberate attention. When the final scroll is sealed, he looks up fully for the first time, studying you with the same calm, evaluating gaze you have seen in court. You understand now, he says, not as a question, but as a quiet confirmation. Justice is not a blade. It is not even a ledger. It is a series of choices, layered so that no single hand holds all the weight. You close your ledger carefully, the last name recorded, the ink drying in silence. As you step out into the fading light of the palace corridors, the knowledge you carry feels heavier than parchment or sword. Justice is not delivered all at once. It is layered, slow, deliberate, quiet. And as we move forward now, beyond these royal chambers and their sealed scrolls, our path turns toward the final burden, carried by those in power, the quiet weight of whispered bribes, hidden wealth, and the secret life of a royal judge balancing mercy, law, and ambition in equal measure. By the time you step into the royal gallery, the sun has risen to its full height, casting angled beams of pale light through tall, arched windows. The gallery is not meant for public display like the great halls or the outer court. It is a long, narrow room lined with woven tapestries and oil portraits, paintings of former kings, royal judges past, noblemen whose fates were long decided and quietly sealed behind layers of ink and silence. The air in here is still, carrying a faint scent of wax and dust rather than smoke or sweat. You are summoned to this space not as a clerk or observer, but as a quiet participant in the next, subtler layer of judgment. The cases ruled on earlier in the day, the scrolls sealed and sent, are only part of the process. Behind the public record, justice is shaped in quieter ways. Whispered agreements, careful negotiations, and unspoken debts. And it is here, in this long gallery with its cool stone floor and rich hangings, that those agreements are weighed and measured. When you enter, several figures are already present. Not guards, not scribes. Men of another kind, nobles draped in fine cloaks, their collars trimmed with fur, rings glinting quietly on gloved fingers. They stand in small clusters along the gallery's length, speaking in voices low enough to avoid echoing from the stone walls. The judge is there as well, seated at a heavy wooden table near the gallery's center. No court robe today, only a dark tunic, his signet ring the sole reminder of his authority. You move to stand near the wall, ledger in hand, as is expected, observing, listening. Not every name that passes through the gallery will find its way into official records. Some conversations begin and end here, written not on parchment, but in quiet agreements, sealed by nods and glances alone. The judge listens more than he speaks. One noble leans in, voice low but insistent, arguing for the leniency of a nephew caught in smuggling. Another requests the seizure of a rival's lands under pretext of unpaid debts. None of it is recorded officially, yet each word carries weight as real as any verdict. You watch the judge's hands as he moves through these conversations. Steady, always folded before him, except when he occasionally lifts his signet ring to press it against a folded scrap of parchment, a private order, sealed and handed directly to a trusted page. No scroll, no public ledger. Historians often debate whether these whispered judgments represented corruption or necessity. Standing here now, you see clearly that it is both. Justice in the kingdom is layered not simply in law and scroll, but in these quiet corridors where influence is traded like coin. At one point, the judge gestures for you specifically. You approach the table, setting your ledger down beside a folded document already waiting there. Record this name, he says quietly. In your private book only. The parchment lists a single noble family, their lands, their holdings, the amount owed in uncollected taxes. It is not marked as an official case. It is not for the public docket. Yet the instructions are clear. This name is to be watched, quietly, carefully. Decisions regarding it will be made here, not in the hall of justice. You write the name in your private ledger with slow precision, feeling the familiar weight of ink drying on the page as you do. No extra note, no flourish, just the bare facts. Enough to remember. As the afternoon stretches on, the gallery fills and empties in quiet waves. New faces arrive, others drift away. Through it all, the judge remains seated, a steady figure against the gallery's long shadows. It becomes clear that these whispers do not come only for favors. Some bring quiet warnings, news of distant rebellions, rumors from foreign courts, all weighed carefully alongside the formal matters of the day. You notice, in particular, a noble woman seated at the far end of the gallery, draped in a cloak of dark green, her face half shadowed beneath a hood. She speaks with no one. Yet more than once, men pause near her, bowing slightly before moving on. Her presence speaks of power not tied directly to parchment or title, but to something deeper, old family ties, alliances unspoken. Even she is part of the gallery's rhythm. As evening draws near, the judge finally rises. A quiet signal that the day's whisperings have come to an end. Pages gather the sealed scraps of parchment left on the table. You gather your own ledger, slipping it beneath your cloak as you step back toward the hall's entrance. The gallery empties without ceremony. No formal dismissal, no closing bell. Only the slow shuffle of boots against stone, the flicker of torchlight as servants move through to snuff candles one by one. Outside, the sky has turned to that deep slate blue that comes just before full night. The air is sharp, carrying the scent of river water and frost. You walk slowly back toward your quarters, boots echoing in time with the last footsteps fading from the royal court. Justice here is not a single decision. It is a pattern laid down layer after layer, some visible, most hidden. And as you step beneath the palace's archways once more, you carry not just the weight of names recorded, but of names never written down at all. But our path does not end here, among whisperers and ledgers. Beyond the quiet corridors of power, another burden waits. The judge's final reckoning, where public justice and private ambition collide completely. Where mercy, law, and quiet wealth are balanced against the lives of men, and where silence carries the final word. By the time you reach the final chamber of the royal court, the halls have grown darker, lit only by torches placed at long intervals. The air here feels heavier, as though each breath carries the weight of 1,000 past judgments. This is not a space for public gatherings or whispered negotiations. It is the chamber where the final decisions are made, not by a council or a scribe, but by the royal judge alone. You enter quietly, as is expected. The room is smaller than the great hall or the gallery, lined with dark wood panels and shelves holding scrolls wrapped in silk and tied with colored cords. At the center stands a single long table, its surface empty except for a single candle burning low and steady, casting a pool of light that does not quite reach the walls. The judge is already there, seated in a high-backed chair carved from dark oak. His face is calm, hands resting on the table, but there is no softness in his expression. This is where the choices too delicate for the docket are laid bare. Mercy or condemnation, not written in ledgers, no, but spoken aloud in this quiet space, where no one else but a trusted clerk bears witness. You stand beside the table, ledger beneath your arm, waiting as the judge unrolls a final scroll. It bears no seal, no royal crest, only a list of names written in a hand you recognize as his own. These are the cases left unresolved, men whose fates were neither settled by public trial nor erased entirely in the gallery's whispered exchanges. The judge speaks each name aloud, voice steady and deliberate. Lord Edric of Suffolk. Mercy or condemnation? You answer with the only thing you can offer in this room, silence. The choice is not yours. It never has been. The judge marks the scroll beside the name with a simple line. No flourish. No elaboration. Just a quiet decision that will carry the weight of a man's life. Sir Robert of Kent. Again, the choice is spoken aloud. Again, a decision is made. Some names are marked for mercy, allowed to return quietly to their estates, stripped of titles perhaps, but left to live. Others are marked for condemnation, removed entirely from record, from memory, from the kingdom's future. Historians often write as though such decisions were based on law alone. Standing here now, close enough to see the scroll's fine fibers beneath the judge's ringed hand, you know the truth is more subtle. Mercy is granted not simply for innocence, but for usefulness, for alliances not yet broken. Condemnation falls not only on the guilty, but on the inconvenient. At one point, the judge pauses over a name that you know well, a man whose disappearance from the tower you personally recorded. Yet here his name remains, as if held in reserve for this final weighing. The judge glances toward you for a brief moment, his expression unreadable. Mercy, he says at last, marking the scroll. You feel the decision settle into the room like a stone dropped into still water. No sound follows it, yet its echo lingers in the air. The scroll slowly shortens as each name is reviewed. Mercy, condemnation, mercy, condemnation. A rhythm as deliberate as any ritual. And through it all, you record nothing in your public ledger. Only in the private book, hidden beneath your cloak, does the true record remain. By the time the last name is spoken, the candle has burned down to a stub. The judge leans back slightly in his chair, the lines around his eyes deeper in the flickering light. It is done, he says quietly, not as a declaration, but as a simple truth. You close your private ledger with deliberate care, tucking it beneath your arm once more. The choices made in this room will ripple outward over the next days and weeks. Some men will be released quietly. Others will vanish from their cells, their names struck from every scroll and wall. Yet no formal announcement will ever be made. The kingdom will carry on as always, its balance preserved by decisions no one outside these walls will ever hear. As you step out into the cold night air, the palace feels quieter than before. The city beyond its gates sleeps beneath a sky stretched with slow-moving clouds, the moon barely visible through their shifting weight. Justice, you know now more than ever, is not a single act. It is a layered thing, mercy and condemnation folded together so closely that even those who carry it out can no longer separate one from the other. And as we move forward once more, our path leads to the final layers of this long, slow journey, into the quiet places where judges lay down their ledgers for the last time, where wealth and secrecy shape not just law, but legacy. When the court has quieted for the evening and the last scroll has been sealed, there remains one record that does not travel with royal messengers. It is not stored in the king's archive, nor copied by scribes. This final record sits in a judge's private chamber, concealed beneath layers of polished oak and iron locks. It is a single ledger, bound in dark leather reinforced with iron corners, its surface worn smooth by years of careful handling. The names within are not those found on public lists. They are not prisoners waiting in the tower, nor nobles named in the royal gallery. These are names erased from public memory, recorded only here. Truths too sharp and too dangerous to appear anywhere else. You are summoned to this chamber one last time, as winter presses heavily against the palace walls. The air in the corridors is cold and still, the stone floors lined with frost that never quite melts. Servants have long since retired, and even the guards move more slowly now, wrapped in heavier cloaks against the cold. They say nothing as you pass. They know why you have come. Inside the chamber, only one candle burns. Its light falls across the judge's desk, revealing neat stacks of parchment pushed aside to make room for the ledger itself. The judge sits behind the desk, no longer in formal robes, but dressed in a plain wool tunic. His face shows no ceremony or pretense, only the quiet weight of what is about to pass between you. Without rising, the judge gestures for you to approach. The ledger lies closed before him, larger than the books kept by scribes, heavier than the tower records you once guarded. Its dark cover bears no crest, no title, only smooth leather worn at the edges where countless hands have held it before. You step forward, placing your own ledger on the edge of the desk, but it feels small and insignificant compared to what rests before you now. The judge speaks quietly, his voice steady and low, as though even the walls of this room might carry echoes farther than they should. This, he says, resting one hand on the cover, is the only true record, not the scrolls sealed in court, not the lists kept in the tower. This is where the kingdom's quietest truths are held. He opens the ledger slowly, revealing rows upon rows of names written in fine, deliberate script. Each name is paired with a brief mark, some circled, others crossed through. These are not simply prisoners. They are nobles, merchants, allies, and enemies alike. Some were spared in the royal gallery, others condemned in private chambers. And some, perhaps most unsettling, were never named aloud at all. These are men and women erased from history, not through formal trial, but through silence and careful calculation. You say nothing as the judge turns the pages. Each line carries the weight of a life decided in silence. Mercy, condemnation, or quiet removal from the record altogether. Historians might one day speak of these judges as figures of harsh law or cold calculation, but standing here now, you see the truth clearly. Justice is not delivered through scrolls and swords alone. It is layered, quiet, relentless. The judge does not linger over each name. His hand moves steadily as he turns page after page, stopping only once to trace a single name with his finger. A nobleman whose fate you remember from weeks past, vanished from the tower without record or explanation. Every judge before me has kept such a book, the judge says at last, his voice quieter still. And when his time ends, he passes it on, not to the king, not to the court, to the next hand steady enough to carry it. Now, with a simple motion, he lifts the ledger from the desk and holds it out toward you. The weight of it settles into the air between you like a final judgment. This is not a request. It is a necessity. A quiet inheritance that comes not through bloodline, but through shared burden. You step forward and take the book, feeling the iron corners press cold against your palms. It is heavier than any ledger you have carried before, heavier even than the swords worn by the king's guards. The judge watches you for a moment longer, as though measuring the exact moment when the weight passes fully from his hands to yours. This is not a duty you asked for, he says simply, but it is yours now. The words settle into the stone walls like ink drying on parchment. No grand farewell follows. No final speech. Only the simple truth shared between two men who understand what it means to carry decisions too quiet for public record. You turn and leave the chamber with the ledger tucked beneath your arm. The corridors feel colder now, though the palace's torches still burn low along the walls. The guards standing at their posts offer no words, only brief nods as you pass. Outside, the night air bites sharp against your face, the sky above thick with slow-moving clouds. Snow drifts in quiet layers across the palace roofs and the tower's high battlements beyond. As you walk back toward your own rooms, the hidden ledger pressed tightly beneath your cloak, there is no sense of triumph or fear, only the steady certainty of a task accepted. Justice in this kingdom is not a single act. It is not a name carved in stone or a scroll sealed with wax. It is layer upon layer, folded and hidden, carried in silence by those trusted enough to bear its weight. And now, it rests in your hands. But our journey does not end here. Beyond this quiet chamber and the final ledger, there remains one last step, the closing of the judge's book for the final time, where law, mercy, and ambition all come to rest, and where silence settles over the record at last. The end does not come with a grand announcement or a final decree spoken before a gathered crowd. It arrives quietly, like dusk settling over stone walls after a long winter day. You notice it first in the way the ledgers remain closed longer each morning. The court clerks arrive later, and the pages carry fewer scrolls. The great gallery stands half empty, its windows unshuttered to let in cold morning light instead of keeping out curious ears. No one says it aloud, but everyone knows the court is closing. One by one, the rituals that shaped each day begin to fall away. The morning docket becomes a brief formality rather than a procession of names. The gallery's whisperers grow fewer, their requests and bargains already settled in private. Even the guards who once stood like statues along the walls now lean against pillars in quiet conversation. The royal judge's steps grow slower, his time spent more often in private reflection than in public judgment. You walk the same corridors you have walked for years, ledger in hand, and yet each step feels more final, less like a routine, more like the last pages of a book being quietly turned. On the final morning, the judge does not summon you to his chambers. Instead, you find yourself walking there unbidden, the instinct stronger than habit. The door stands half open. Inside, the desk has been cleared. No scrolls, no ink pots, no seal stamps. Only the single hidden ledger resting at the center, its iron-bound cover closed, its weight waiting for you. You step forward and lift it carefully, knowing without needing to be told that there is no more to add. The last name has been written, the final mark made. Justice in this court has reached its quiet end. When you leave the chamber, there are no guards waiting outside, no herald ready to announce the judge's departure. The palace halls feel still in a way they never have before, less like a place of judgment now, and more like a house slowly falling asleep. The judge himself is already gone. No ceremony marked his leaving. One evening, as the sun set beyond the frozen Thames, he simply stepped out through the palace gate, taking no more with him than the clothes on his back. His work was finished. The court no longer needed him. You walk the full length of the gallery one last time. The velvet curtains that once muffled whispered voices have been drawn back. The tall windows stand open to the pale sky, their glass clear and cold. You pause beneath one window, setting the hidden ledger on a narrow ledge, just long enough to glance outside. Beyond the walls, London stretches quiet beneath its winter sky. The rooftops are lined with frost. The river moves slowly between ice and stone bridges. Somewhere, a bell tolls, not from the court, but from a chapel beyond its reach. There is no final verdict here, no sharp line drawn in ink or stone. Only the simple truth carried by all who served this place. Courts close. Names fade. And yet the shape of judgment remains, folded into the walls, written quietly in ledgers only a few will ever see. You pick up the hidden ledger again, holding it beneath your arm as you leave the gallery. Your steps echo softly in the empty space. The last candle is snuffed out by a servant's hand. The doors close behind you, their iron hinges groaning softly in the cold. Outside, the sky shifts from pale gray to violet, the last light fading over the rooftops. You walk on in silence, the palace growing smaller behind you with each step. No guards follow. No pages carry scrolls after you. Only the quiet weight of the ledger and the knowledge that, for now, the court is closed. But even as one story ends, another begins. Beyond these halls, beyond the tower's silent stones, and the judge's private chamber, history continues its quiet march forward. And as night settles over the kingdom, carrying with it the last echoes of verdict and mercy, there remains one final pause before true silence, one last moment to set down the record, close the book, and let sleep carry all these layered truths away into darkness. And that's where we'll leave it for tonight. From the lonely steps of the medieval executioner to the quiet chambers of royal judges. From the cold, damp stones of the Tower of London to the silent scrolls locked away in hidden ledgers. A long, slow walk through the layered weight of medieval justice, where names were written, erased, and forgotten beneath centuries of dust and silence. If you're still awake, thanks for staying with me all the way to the end. And if you drifted off somewhere between the royal gallery's whispered bargains and the judge's final stroke of the quill, that's perfectly fine too. That's really what this is all for. If you enjoyed this slower, sleep-friendly journey into history, feel free to like the video and subscribe for more. And as always, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it was when you pressed play. I always appreciate seeing where these quiet midnight stories are reaching. For now, I'll let the echoes of the courtroom fade. The footsteps along stone corridors fall still, and the last candle's flame dim one soft flicker at a time. Sleep well, and I'll see you next time.